Isn't it technically the start of the show now, though?
Yes, it is technically the start of the show.
So here we are. Here we are for another episode of Summoning Insight. 9 had the fucking assist on that loss. Like, let's be real, that wasn't peak Cloud9. Meanwhile, now TL looks mega shaky, Monty, because of that EG series. Like, EG doesn't even seem like they have the guys, and somehow they were fucking making it happen, and they were taking them all the way to Game 5. I personally think this has been a rule of mine in analysis for many, many years now. I don't look generally at form beyond things like, can you like make this comp work, for example? I look at the matchup. So I don't care that TL almost lost to EG and that 100 Thieves smashed Cloud9. I ask myself, how does TL match up in 100 Thieves? And the problem is this. I think a lot of those advantages that 100 Thieves had in that Cloud9 series will not be present in the TL series. Like, I think it's going to be way hard. Like, I don't really know, for example, which lane they can win through, Monty. I don't think there is one. Like, for me, Abadagi Bjergsen, about similar level. If I look at the top lane, which was looking awesome from Someday, right? First of all, there is no Summit who is going to just jump and get deleted on Renekton. Instead, you have Bwipo, who, by the way, is a better player than Someday right now, or is at least as good, similar level. So again, like, where are we going to get edges here? Like, beyond Closer going really ham in a few games, I think the teams match up pretty well. I expect a close series, but I think TL's better. That's my take.
Yeah, I think the caveat, like, that series from C9 was just so fucking terrible.
Delete it from our brain,
that even though 100 Thieves did well, Someday has had a great year so far. The problem with TL is that they looked shaky even in some of their games versus EG, but also some of those games were kind of lost like at level 1 or very early on in that best of 5. And TL has made late game macro mistakes. It's true. That's how they've lost games, especially with Bwipo sometimes getting caught out. But
I thought EG actually cynically drafted well, Monty. They actually looked like they understood that they're not the favorite and played properly. I love that shit.
The problem is that TL will almost always make it to the late game, and that's where 100 Thieves decision making completely fucking collapses historically. So as long as TL can kind of weather the storm, I'm not sure that even if they get picked off, that 100 Thieves is the team that's going to be able to transition that into a win. Because 100 Thieves, the way they win is they get early snowballs and they end the game very quickly. If you get into late game scenarios, that's when their macro just kind of face plants. So that's where you actually have to win against Team Liquid most of the time, even if Team Liquid is the one making a mistake. So we'll see. Maybe they've addressed some of these issues. We never got to see that in the C9 series because it was just over instantly every single game. Also, C9 was just terrible. Their drafts were terrible. Their play was terrible. Their play wasn't even good in their win this week against Golden Guardians.
I just played a worse opponent. For real.
So I know last week we said like there was like a 4-1 odds for Golden Guardians. Well, looks like Esports Bet was right.
Yes, exactly.
Having watched that series, I would have said those were fair odds.
Yes.
In retrospect, but
who knows what the fucking mega brain computer that figures the shit out is? But it's smarter than us. I'll give you that. And by the way, I found that happen a lot of times. They are just fucking synced up to the Matrix or the fates of Greek mythology. Like, how are they getting this shit?
I was really surprised because. Holy shit, Thorin. That Golden Guardians Cloud9 series was awful.
Mate, this was like rolling back.
Bad.
This was like rolling back the clock 6 years in NA, where if you have control of the Baron, you just always win because the other team has to fight you for the Baron. Like, mate, I thought I was watching like little kid. This is like kindergarten League of Legends. What the fuck is this? Like, mate, they can't just say no to it. Here's the problem. This is why we need more region crossover. If you brought Rogue over, they'd tell you all about having watch parties and turn up to a dragon, watching them take it, and then politely walking back to the lane like a gentleman. They would do it after you, sir. You know, they teach them proper etiquette, Monty, because, mate, it was killing me, some of these fights they were taking. Like, I even thought with Cloud9 being like psychologically wounded from that upper match. If you just played a normal game, they might give you some chances, mate. You might have had a really interesting series, you know.
I can't imagine like what was going through Golden Guardians' mind a lot of times within this series. Like, I don't think their drafts were a problem. It's like they just literally didn't understand their win conditions a lot lot of the time.
I actually just realized, because we're going to edit it later, that I acted earlier as though this was a privately recorded thing, and all the people on the stream must be like, why did he just do that again? Like, what the fuck? Like, I've only just realized that now. That's actually bad open. I forgot we were actually still live on this. Whatever.
So we're still live.
Whatever.
So guys, basically we're putting the Dylan Falco section second on the VOD.
We'll have to learn the rhythm of this, guys. We haven't done it many times before. It's all right.
So that's why it was so fucked up for you guys live. It will make sense in the VOD, okay? It will make sense in the
I wonder why you kept going with it. I'm like, fucking shut up. I'm trying to fucking redo it. Yeah, whatever. Like, whatever.
Yeah. We're still alive, Thorin. I hate to tell you. But yeah, I think in the first game of this series, there were just so many questions because it's not, Golden Guardians, I think their draft wasn't necessarily terrible in the first game. Like they have clear team fight, win conditions that they can operate with. They've got strong meta champions. I don't think the Nocturne was an issue in this series. I think the way you play it, like they were literally playing 3 tiers in their lanes. Like they're playing Corki and Xayah and Ornn all with tier early game and with a sub level 6 Nocturne. So he doesn't have ult yet. And they're trying to fight this like first dragon with triple tier champs. So I guess they just have a bunch of, all they have is just fucking mana. You know what I mean? And then they go into these dragon fights, which I think you can contest, and they also fought it badly, and they also positioned it badly. So the whole thing was just incredibly awkward.
Yeah. No, I agree. I even think that's the craziest part of it, mate. It's like they did the salty run back twice. It's like they were just like, listen, they can't possibly beat us on it again. And they just kept giving like the same fucking champs and opening it up. Like, here's what I don't get. You should have just seen by like the EGTL series. That's what you do if you're an underdog, if you draft. You don't just go, my guy likes Nocturne, so he's just playing Nocturne now. Like, yeah, but for what reason? How it's going to attack the enemy? He just likes Nocturne. What are we doing here? This is professional sports, guys. Like, that's a scenario, by the way, where I'm not saying, understand this, fans. I'm not saying Golden Guardians were going to win. I don't even think they could necessarily win. I just think that that's an example of where you can infer the coaching staff had a poor concept of what the series was supposed to be, or how they had any chance to sort of match up or beat them,
Yeah, it's just like, just don't fight early dragons. Like you don't have to do that. Even if you think and you have an angle, right? It's just completely unnecessary. Like you've got a great scaling composition. You're going to be able to use these things in order to take wins or in order to do well within this match. And so that was the most frustrating thing for Golden Guardians for me, was just watching them amble around and not even understand the basis of their win conditions. Like that is really awkward. And so for me, it was mostly just operator error from the Golden Guardians. And even Cloud9, yes, I think there are some upsides to this series. So first off, one of the things that we needed to see was like Fudge being able to carry games, which he absolutely did. I think he played really well over the course of this series, especially once they put Summit on, the Ornn, for example, and they were starting to play more weak side. I liked seeing them play the Gangplank into the Ornn as well. I think there were a lot of really good moments. Isles stepping in a high pressure situation performed better than Winsome did the previous week, because Winsome was actually, people were so focused on the Renekton shit that they weren't actually looking at Winsome's legitimately really bad support play during that series. And Fudge stepped up and actually carried, which is something that he's been playing more supportive in terms of his style and in terms of his picks over the course of this split. Now, was it easy to play mid lane in this situation? Yes, because they were kind of inting into him. I think he said that in his interview, which is like, it's easy to play LeBlanc against a bad team, which is true. Which is true, because they're never going to actually catch you out. But they also didn't have any tools to deal with LeBlanc. Like, how are you ever going to kill LeBlanc with a composition that is Gwen, Nocturne, Victor, Jhin, Leona? Like, you're never going to hit her with CC ever. So you just get to poke them for free, basically. But yeah, it was a depressing series from Golden Guardians. This was bad on every level. I'm shocked to have seen the Jhin. Mate,
that's one thing I can't handle. Why is that still a thing? Before we get to end, you're all lost in the weeds in America. You're all off in like, how much scrim time do we have? And what is the team culture like? And are we all getting the right imports? Here's a crazy concept for you. When I open up a fucking one of these Gamepedia things and start remembering the champions, why is it when I look at NA, I'm like, what year is this? Like, I watch all the major regions. What year is this? Why is Senna being played? Why is Nocturne in the jungle? What the fuck is going on? Like, what is this draft priority? Like, what is this shit? Like, you guys, it's like you're not even playing League of Legends. You've got the fucking stabilizers on, riding along next to someone on a real bike, going like, oh, can I ever go one day? Like, well, one day. All right, Jimmy, you stay on the stabilizers. Fucking hell. What is this shit? Why is Senna being picked in a fucking playoff series?
Fasting Senna too.
What's going on? What's going on?
I mean, honestly, Thorin, like, I think that the only conclusion I can come to is that they realized that Ole was going to be the only person who could carry them out of
That's true. That's not even necessarily incorrect judgment. Yeah, it's probably right.
It's not even a joke. They're like, well, maybe if Tom Kench gets tanky enough, then we could actually, and Ole's playing and we can win this game. Because Ole's been good all split guys.
Anytime you're hoping for the Tom Kench hard carry, it's like maybe the first season the champion came out. It's fucking been nerfed a million times.
So this is all to say, I think that this was a much better series overall from C9. You'll notice also they switched to big time lane bullies, the Caitlyn or the MF in the bot lane. They switched to more weak side top laners and Fudge carried. So these are all very good signs for Cloud9. But again, this was, we can look at that, but we can also gloss over some really horrible mechanical plays that C9 made in this series. This series looked like trash all around. So it was really depressing.
The problem is, Monty, you know the way they do it in NA, and it's the worst shit of all time. They use this thing where it's a narrative linear progression. So what they do is this, right? We're supposed to say, I still have no idea if Cloud9 could win LCS. I have no idea how they'll match up against the other good teams. If they replayed 100 Thieves, quite frankly, I would favour 100 Thieves. I don't know if they've fixed all their problems. But that's not the way you do it in NA. The way you do it in NA goes like this. And Cloud9 bounces back with a 3-0 resounding win, getting back on the horse, and they'll be going into that next matchup. Let's see if it's going to come next week. Like, that's always just been the way in LCS. We all know it. So now the same people who I'm sure were like, sell all the players after the upper bracket, now we're like, no, I believe in them. And the Isles move, that's the game. Like, by the way, if you think that, there's an angle I want to get into right there. Everyone has bigged up this team, the whole split long, Monty, but that guy plays one bad series and he's just like fucking, it's like that guy, that picture with Stalin. He's just been like memory hold out of history. Like, what do you mean, Winsome? No, we have Isles here, son. It was always Isles. Like, what is this shit? He's just never going to play again. Is that it? Is it just over? Is he just playing solo now? What the fuck? Is he going next on splits? What is this shit? Surely the plan has to be to reintegrate him. Like, I thought he'd even play a game here or something at Monty and sort of like test him out again. So like, what's going on?
I mean, Winsome was really bad, man. Like,
he's just done now. Why was he playing the playoffs then? Why did he test out in the split? I don't get what's going on with this roster, mate.
I don't know either. We can only speculate, right? I do think Isles had a better performance, so Cloud9, I think, made the right
in
call.
The games he did. Yeah, I'm with you on that.
Yeah, but it is weird that it even got to this point where you're like on elimination of the lower bracket, and like this is where you put Isles in. A little bit odd. Maybe here's the thing. They didn't have an audience for most of the time, so maybe Winsome with the audience was the factor because, like, he got nerves, and so they wanted to swap it out. That's certainly a possibility. To
be fair, Berserker Isles as a name for a bot lane does sound like something out of a swords and sorcery fantasy landscape, doesn't it? Sounds pretty sick.
Yeah, it's just like the Scandinavian islands, back in the day. That's just perfect for a fantasy Viking culture. The other series, I guess, wasn't really very informative either at the end of the day. Like, I think that Evil Geniuses had a good draft strategy coming in, which is just mega pinch the mid pool and then have Takui play Orianna.
Oh, it's beautiful.
I can't handle these series, Thor. Like, honestly, if I've been watching all of the regions playoffs, and it is just terrible to watch these matches.
You know what? I'm not even going to joke, right? For real. I know, listen, again, this is where they're going to get lost money. They're going to think I'm going to say EG is going to win the playoffs. They're not going to win the playoffs. That is definitely not happening. But EG at the moment is coaching the best in the playoffs of all the teams.
Yes.
Like, as you say, that is so cynical. But I tell you what, mate, if I was playing against Takui, I would just ban him out of the game and they go, what do you know? FlyQuest can't win now.
Who's going to carry? Is it Kumo or Johnson?
Exactly.
Now, by the way, guys, FlyQuest, now, I will give credit to Kumo. That TP to win the game and, like, backdoor the Nexus was a very smart play. Okay? But the fact that they almost lost that game after getting a pretty early soul and then allowed EG back into it where it even came down to that point was terrible by them. And that was the game where Tukui was actually playing Ahri, and it was enabled to have a champion that is somewhat decent. I think that FlyQuest, once you saw that it was going down to these like Orianna picks for Tukui, like you just have to raise the priority of your mid lane draft picks on blue side, and he has been carrying you guys. He's been the best player on your team. First pick him something, for fuck's sake. Like, they're not even banning the Ahri. That's the thing, is in game 3. Oh, they did ban the Ahri in game 3, but they did ban it in the second rotation. So you were just waiting to get him a pick, right? So I don't get it. Like, I think that Tukui is a player that you have to prioritize in these drafts. And if you, okay, let's just say you are going to play the Orianna. For the love of God, do not play Orianna with Volibear, Scion, and Nautilus. There is no way you will ever kill this Jinx.
There's no damage.
No, I mean, there's no way to get back to the Jinx. Danny's just gonna, like, if you're trying to fight front to back against this composition that EG is running, when they have huge backline threat from, I don't know, Chaos Storm, Gangplank Barrels, Jinx Rocket, like Jinx Ult, there is no way to kill Danny. You cannot kill Danny. So
we saw in the game, he just fucking smurfed it, didn't he? I know.
You cannot kill Danny with these compositions. And in the last game, at least you have the Ornn, but even then, if he dodges Ornn ult, then there's no way to kill him. There's nothing. You got nothing.
I'll give you a little bit of insight, because since I play support, obviously the role I used to off-roll the most was ADC, because you just know the lane, right? All I'll say is this: anytime I used to have to play ADC back in the good old days, before every champion had 700 free dashes and like fucking spellbook flash type shit, like before all that shit ruined League of Legends, this sort of game that Danny had here was what you hoped in your mind every game was going to be as ADC. That you were the hero, a double-lift-esque fuck, 1v9ing the whole game.
And you have a Tom Kench to eat you, whatever you want.
It's like you're just, no one could touch you. You're just moving between them. It's like being in the Matrix. You're just dodging under bullets. Oh, it's the shit. But the problem is, you get that game once out of every 50 now. So enjoy it, Danny. That was it, mate. That's out now. We've got that out of the way. You're back to getting all the fucking solo laners.
This is like the Jinx dream, by the way. There's zero threat on the Jinx in the first place from the enemy team composition, and then on top of that, you have a Tom Kench to just bail you out, even if somehow you miss position. So, yes. I mean, credit to EG. I think these. I mean, they did a good job in preparation for FlyQuest, but it was also just, I don't know what FlyQuest was doing here. Like, these drafts are terrible. I don't know how you win a game unless you hope that your opponent makes massive mistakes. I mean, especially by game 4, it was just absolutely excruciating, because then Vulcan and Danny are just like getting kills at level 1 in lane. So there's really no coming back. These playoffs from LCS have not been encouraging. I think the real question is here is it even possible for anybody to beat Team Liquid? And people will point at the EG series and say, well, it went to 5 games. But if you actually look at those games, there were some pretty big extenuating circumstances. Like, I don't think in a rematch that TL is going to take the same level 1 risks that they took necessarily in some of those games, or like be caught out by some of the surprise EG level 1s.
Also, remember, a win isn't a win. As in, Team Liquid would win and mega stomp, and then EG would like, oh, nice little, oh, we just won the game. Oh, that's nice. Oh, cool. Go next. Like, that's the difference. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't like, wow, the heavyweight match, they're taking blow after blow. No, it was more like Team Liquid was like, all right, next game, and then they were just fucking KOing EG. Like, it was obvious TL was going to win.
Yes, and by the way, guys, if EG is picking Renekton Italy, it's not because they think they're going to win. It's not like they think, oh, we hit game 5. It truly is a 50-50. Like, they felt like they had to take a big risk in order to win that series.
It's the thing, fans. I'll give everyone a little tip, because, you know, I always give everyone tips on how to enjoy the reality shows of TSM and all the different content. Here's another little pro tip. Even if you don't like LS, when you see a draft like that, make a note. You go back on his YouTube channel a week later when there was, and you watch that game for the draft 100%. Like, that's your fucking box office right there. You know it's going to be amazing when the Renekton gets locked in. Oh, it's beautiful. Just go watch it. It's the shit, boys. It's the shit. Because you have to realize LS always reacts every time like he's never even seen the champion. Never mind. Like, it's hilarious.
He's a great entertainer.
Yes, he's got it. He was being electrocuted when they're doing the draft, but that way it's hilarious.
His eyes roll back in his head. He just starts having a seizure. Oh my God. This playoffs though is so disappointing from NA overall. The problem is like you can't even be hopeful about Team Liquid if they win, because they've had such insane late game flaws that there isn't really. I struggle to see a way that you could delude yourself as a fan to thinking that they aren't going to just get massively destroyed at an international tournament.
The problem for me is this, Monty. The two teams that actually at the moment look like the best is TL and 100 Thieves, and those teams will not fucking make any game that they don't smash early. So that's already a problem. And Cloud9, the whole premise was supposed to be, well, at least Summit is sort of the big brother playing with the little kids, like, haha, slap, we have an elite Korean. Well, that's all gone now, isn't it? Like, that dream died, didn't it? Like, you can ship that one back. He's an NA player now, boys. It only took him, 9 weeks, but they got to him after all.
Once you get to NA, it's just a matter of time till you turn back into a pumpkin. That's
and by the way,
how it goes.
Are you ready? This is the really mean way of describing someone who did win a Series 3-0, Monty. I saw a lot of his fans were like, no, look, you guys said he had no champion pool, but he is playing other champions. Against who? Against who? He's not accused 10 out of 10 on them, was he? He just. What you mean is there are so many bad opponents in NA. Summit, a guy who clearly does have a limited champion pool, he learned, my bad, I wasn't picking those champions because I thought I had to be good on them. Oh, you mean just pick the champion? Oh, okay, boss, sure. I can lock in champions and win against nobody, of course. Like, nah, come on, boys, come on. Come on. That's not going to work. You are aware of who they're going to send from China, right? These top players are murderers, boys. They're monsters. They're the craziest players in the world. Summit is going to. You better hope Summit doesn't go that way. Just hope it doesn't. Bwipo at least has that edge where Bwipo's such a weird player. He could maybe throw a curveball.
I agree.
You know,
it would be more fun to see Bwipo internationally at this current point in time, for sure. Also, he just will, randomly int in the late stages of the game. So
funny.
It keeps things fresh.
Yeah. Exactly. You never know what's going on with Bwipo. I love it. Yeah. Exactly.
I don't know what to say. Honestly, like, these playoffs are real bad.
Exactly. Bwipo's like putting a hamster down your trousers. It's going to be exciting. Who knows what's going to happen, though?
It's so disappointing compared to how this split started with Cloud9 with LS, making the interesting draft choices, I think playing pretty well. You see the Summit dominance. At least you had hope for TL. You're like, well, all these individually great players, surely we'll just get it together. TL is somehow less than the sum of their parts right now. Like this team should be internationally competitive with the names on this roster. There is no way that this team shouldn't at least be able to take a game or two in a best of 5 against the top team with the names that they have.
Here's what gives away that everyone in their heart of hearts know LCS is doomed. Whenever Europe has a scenario like this, where the two best teams on paper, Rogue and Fnatic, have both lost in embarrassing fashion, that's when NA is supposed to be able to say, maybe the best LCS team is better than LEC. Have you seen a single person say that? I haven't seen any LCS players say it. I haven't seen anyone. Nobody said that. And by the way, that's the go-to when you have a dominant team in NA course. It's the go-to angle, isn't it? That gets everyone upset and all the big drama on the talk show. No one's even attempted that angle, guys. That's all you need to know.
It's possible too that because Cloud9 just fell on their face and EG also, hasn't really gotten substantially better, I would say, since lock-in, that it's just Team Liquid has literally nobody good to practice against. And also 100 Thieves spent most of the split being pretty bad.
Yes.
Because Abadage and the bot lane was unusually bad. Now that they've ramped up again, I think there's hope. But it's also true that the meta has switched into like early ganking junglers, which certainly will help a team like 100 Thieves and close her out. There is a chance, I think, 100 Thieves actually goes ahead and wins this split. That's if they can snowball early games, they can easily win against Team Liquid. So hard to say what's going to happen, but I think regardless of which team wins, even if there's a meta shift, I think their performance at MSI is going to be super suspicious. Like I'll
also say as well, when people talk about the teams, you can tell the people who didn't watch much of the LCS because they're still on the narrative from last year. Like, Someday is way better than he was last year.
Oh, yeah.
Like, the sad thing was he was kind of shit when they won the split. That's why it felt like, sort of like each fucking honorary championship at the end. He's actually good again now, guys. Like, for real. Like, if you watch him play now, he's back to being actually pretty legit. So that's like found money right there.
And also, the last few weeks, we've seen more of a transition into weak side top. He just plays Ornn every game. That's fine. He can do that again now. That's always been his specialty. Now, the thing about earlier this split is that he was they were playing through him and he was doing well, which was great for him, right? But now he's like back in the old someday comfort zone. So you would think things would go well, especially that Abadage has now stepped it up also. I don't know what happened to him, but looks like he recovered his motivation at some point during this split and is able to play at his expected level again. I don't know what else.
Get ready for fucking Impact and Someday it's just going to be on in the back pocket at all times. These motherfuckers, they've never met at all, and they don't like. Then again, they are the best at doing it though, mate. You just put them on the weak side, you just win, don't you? Just win.
So I don't know how much I want to talk about LCS playoffs anymore, but we should talk a little bit about Champions Queue because we haven't done it since the Ole episode, and I think there's some interesting things to dissect here as now everybody is like, this player says Champions Queue isn't working and no one's playing it and blah, 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 because there's some very weird obsessions, and like Papa Smithy's come out and said like, don't witch hunt my players, etc., or don't witch hunt players. Players have different ways of practicing. And I think that there's a lot to actually have a more sober take or middle ground take here. So what are your thoughts, Thorin, on the whole Champions Queue debacle right now?
First of all, I will say, I will actually agree with Papa Smithy. I don't think that the logic should go like this. A player hasn't played much Champions Queue, therefore he is not practicing enough, therefore he doesn't care about winning, therefore he shouldn't have that job / I am going to witch hunt him. Obviously, it goes without saying, like, I'll give you an example. If you're Bjergsen, I don't give a fuck if you ever play a single Champions Queue game. As long as you do your solo queue, as long as you do your scrims, as long as you play well in the game, that's fine. I will say, if you are a fucking rookie or someone who's borderline, you better be in that fucking Champions Queue just for the optics, mate. You better look like you're working hard, like you're trying to fight for the spot. But I also do think, this is one thing I want to briefly call out, right? When people on these shows, we do these topics, which are the classic ones of why NA sucks and why they won't be as good as Koreans. I've noticed, Monty, one of the reasons fans love it, actually, you'd think they'd hate it, right? NA fans would hate it. No, because what they do in their mind is this, Monty. They're with us on that side. They think they're sat with us and we're all Gordon Ramsay going, this isn't good enough. Like, it should be better, you bloody, it's all raw and that. They don't realise, wait a minute, guys. You know how the culture of these players means they'll never be as diligent as the Koreans and the Chinese. They'll never put in the same hours. They'll never be able to even mentally handle the strain. That's you as well, the fan. So I'm getting sick and tired of American fans being like, these players aren't even bloody playing all hours of the day. If I was a pro, you wouldn't do any of that if you're a pro, because you're all Americans. You would also be resting on your laurels. You'd also be a sick LeBlanc player and go, I don't need to do that. I don't want to play LeBlanc. Like, I'm just going to get my solo queue hours up. You'd all be doing that. So first of all, stop taking yourself out of the equation. You're all like that. And then secondly, for pro players, same thing applies. Monty, in about 4 different esports now, I have heard over 10 years of NA pros tell me the same thing. Scrims all suck. Nah, none of them play properly. They won't even actually like have a proper pool, and then people don't turn up, and then they just didn't you, and then they leave the scrim. That's all of you. You're talking about yourselves, you morons. Half of you were on that guy's team last year. Eventually, you all have to get together and look in the mirror and go, oh, fuck, it's us. Wait, you mean if I fix things and lead by example, other people might follow me? Because that's the thing I always found whack, dude. You know, back in the day when everyone used to say, like, oh, people like Bjergsen are so diligent, they're practicing all the time. Is it ever going to rub off on any teammates? Have you ever thought of going to a guy and being a leader and being like, mate, I notice you're having problems here. Come practice with me a bit. Let's get a few duos in. Let's get some games going. Let's turn it around. Why is everyone just like an individual egotist just fucking getting paid millions and at the end going, nothing I could do, region shit? You are the region. The fans of the region. The pro players of the region. The coaches are the region. The fucking up-and-coming players are the future of the region. You have to solve this, guys. Because as I said on the rant on the other show, like, it's all well and good being like, but Thorin, we have to work smarter, not harder. You can't even work hard at the moment. Let me see you work hard, then we can figure out working smart.
And also, part of it is just simply the server, guys. There just aren't as many players to be competitive in North America as there are in Europe and Korea. However, here's some things that boost up your point, Thorin. So let's just take other games, for example. Let's take Counter-Strike. Well, there was a team of Brazilians led by Fallen who came from Brazil, then they came to North America, which was notoriously shitty for scrims in Counter-Strike at the time, and then they won a major.
They became the number 1 team in the world, yeah.
So they are literally a team in a North American region, which has never been a good region for Counter-Strike as a whole. They've won 1 major ever in Counter-Strike history, North America. And yet this team came to a North American practice environment and then translated that to becoming the best in the world. That's mentality.
Mate, I've got a punchline for you, because when you find out what they explain as to how they did it, the whole thing, this is the Gordian knot being chopped here, boys, right? I once asked Fallen and Zeus, the coach and the star and the in-game leader, how did you do it? Like, how do you get good practice if you know the opponent isn't good practice and he's not going to play like the European teams do, who were the equivalent of our Koreans in Counter-Strike? And they said, no, we took that into account. If we were playing an online scrim on like 8 high ping, then what we would do is we wouldn't just take like an easy kill that we can get just because of the ping and the fact that the guy's shit. We would play as if it was a real team on LAN. We would play correctly, like certain scenarios. We would essentially just force ourselves to be disciplined so that then when we got to the real top teams, they did play that way and it worked. I know that sounds mad, but that is what you have to do. I get the vibe, Monty, that it has never changed. That to this day, there are players trying to win the scrim to boost their own ego and show the other guy he's shit. It's 2022. That's still a thing. It is, though. And so, unfortunately, I get the feeling like they still don't get its practice, you know. They still don't get what practice is.
So that's an example of a team in North America being able to translate North American, which still was not in a different game, was not the peak of competition. Here's another example for you. Right now in Rainbow Six, there are Korean teams that are becoming significantly better and are starting to become dangerous at international level, despite the fact that nobody in Korea plays fucking Rainbow Six. Okay?
Yeah.
So the fact that Damwon Kia has a team that's like topping groups at the Six Invitational this last year is because it's a work ethic thing, and it's not necessarily the level of competition is a factor, and it is worse objectively in NA. But I'm just telling you, here's an example of a team that did it in NA to become the world's best in Counter-Strike. Yes. And here's an example of a very low population of players in Asia in Rainbow Six. And now these Korean teams are starting to make deep runs at international tournaments. They're not winning yet, but they're certainly overperforming based on the number of players within that region. Right?
By the way, I've heard when you're in a team like that, because remember, DRX is like a real org. It's obviously the team that has a great League of Legends team. When you're in an org like that, they don't care that you're not in League of Legends. You still practice all day long like everyone else does.
Yeah, they're in the Damwon Kia facility in Seoul with the LoL team, you know?
Oh, yes, it was Damwon, not DRX. That goes without saying. Like, if you're a Korean pro, that is just expected of you. So the point here is, I have never said Westerners should be like Koreans. I actually don't think you should, by the way. I think it'll ruin your life. My problem is I don't know how you make up the gap. And Champions Queue was an interesting idea, but there's the other thing we should talk about, right? Obviously, it turns out, like the Ole episode was a good example. He said either you couldn't queue or it'd be like, I've heard some people say the matchmaking and it was bad, like it didn't match up, etc. Like, what are your thoughts overall as a tool? Do you actually think it's beneficial? I'm kind of a bit 50-50. I'm not sure.
Yeah, Ole, one of Ole's complaints when he was on the show was that the teams were often unbalanced because it doesn't necessarily, like the ELO system, as I understand it, is based off of wins and losses, and you get more for winning than losing. So it's a factor of how many games you play a lot of the time. And so the teams would be unbalanced, which I think is why a lot of pro players don't like it. But I think objectively, having a gated, private, low ping solo queue or like practice environment is a huge advantage that other regions just don't have, right? If you're trying to get away from one trick ponies and all of these other kind of lower tier players or players who abuse the regular matchmaking systems in order to get into the higher echelons of LP, then I would think that this would be a better environment than solo queue if it was actually used to its fullest potential. Now, I think probably there are ways Riot could make it better, but I think it's better than what any of the other regions have. And it's financially incentivized too, so you can make money by playing it. It just seems good all around, frankly. I don't know why you would complain. Like, Riot gave the players everything that they had been complaining about for years. Oh, the ping's too high, which was always a bullshit excuse, guys. It was always bullshit. That was never real. Like, yeah, the ping affects it, but you can still practice on 60 ping. It's not the end of the universe. And I just don't know what else they want at this point in time. Like, there was always some other excuse as to why these things couldn't be done, and now it's here. They were setting up in-houses beforehand, but then that, they wouldn't do that. And like Riot wouldn't let you stream the in-houses. So players didn't want to do that because they wanted to stream in solo queue in their off hours. So it's all gone now. You can they gave you everything. They built you a tool. And
what about this? Here's the problem That's exactly the issue, Monty, is what they say is not what they want. Yeah, I learned this in Counter-Strike. If people don't know, me and Monty went and did an actual league giving away $2 million a year, and we did all these things that all these players and talent told us they wanted. They told us they wanted things like transparency as to what you were doing. They told us they wanted like net 30 days to be paid within. When we did all these things, we found it didn't move the needle a fucking inch. Nobody really wanted it. It was just something they thought they wanted or said they wanted, but didn't in reality matter. So in the same sense, right, think of the history of North American League of Legends. It goes like this. I was there at the beginning, at least after the first year or so. It goes like this, right? Why do we need to live in team houses? I don't need to. We're on the best team, so we don't need a team house. That's for the other guys. Coaches, no one could coach me. I know everything about the game. Then it was like, oh, boot camps. I mean, I guess we could do it. Like, mate, the joke is they always like claim, like, well, if I had this, or do I even need that? Like, it's just people giving an excuse to stay where they are now. Because that's the thing, like you said, if the main thing was ping, they'd all be in Champions Queue all the time, by definition. It's the only way you can play low ping. Remember, Monty, they used to always say, how am I supposed to practice my Yasuo combos when Faker is on 9 ping? Go to Champions Queue. Nah, but then the matchmaker. Exactly. Now we've found out what's more important to you. It's more important not to play on low ping, but to not have bad matchmaking. Or to be able to know, is another factor, I think, in solo queue, when you think the matchmaking scuffed, you just figure out about the game, you don't care, do you? But the problem is, people are going to judge you how you play in Champions Queue. Like, that's the problem, in my opinion, mate. Like, you can give people as many tools as you want. They've got to eventually take some like self-responsibility and do something with those tools, or explain why the tool doesn't work. Don't just go, it doesn't work, so I'm just not playing it. Well, then how does that progress any of us? It doesn't. It puts you back to square one, mate. Because I agree, mate. You give the problem with NA people in general, it's actually the problem with NA as a country. You have too much by default, which makes you not value what you have, and therefore not understand how anyone would even get to that point to then get all the rest. And so what happens is, just like in this scenario, I don't think people get this, Monty. You know when everyone talks about how, like, oh, in Korea they have every advantage. They have all the esports industry and the low ping. Yeah, and you know half the guys that have beaten your ass and won the world championship were like a runaway kid who was a 15-year-old who had nothing in his life. He didn't even finish school. He went all in on a children's video game, and he practiced it till his eyes bloody bled, and at the end he won the championship. And you were like, well, he is the privileged one. Like, you guys can't fucking do it. Meanwhile, the American player grows up middle class family, nice PC, no PC bag. Yes. Oh, he got, you know, that's right, mum and dad, I'm good on solo queue. Can I take a year off uni? Yeah, of course, you can start it next year. And then that guy goes, I am the disadvantaged one. Fuck you, dude. Fuck you. That's
it's actually it's actually so true, Thorin. I was going to mention this too, which is like it is also a lot of players, and we've said this before in Korea, and I'm not going to name all the names because that's their fucking business and not yours necessarily. But I know many players in League of Legends who, have won titles, LCK, champions, worlds, who are like supporting their siblings and their families. They're supporting their parents and their siblings on their salaries. And if they get kicked off this team, there is no more money and they don't have an education. So that's it, right? In America, because now this is possible in Korea because PC bongs are so cheap. And it's also possible in other parts of the world, like Southeast Asia and stuff like that, for you to be a great PC gamer. In America, we don't have internet cafes that are affordable. So you have to be at least middle class, like pretty well off historically to afford a PC, as opposed to, usually consoles are cheaper, right, than PCs are. And so, if you can afford a PC, you probably have a pretty cushy lifestyle, and that drains a lot of the motivation that people have to be good because it's not their entire lifestyle or socioeconomic status that is in the balance. And it's kind of shitty for the players who have to, like, they're ride or die on esports because sometimes they're not good enough or they fall off through no fault of their own, and then their lives are fucked. And that's really depressing, guys. But I think the motivation is definitely higher among a lot of the Asian teams and players.
And also, as a corollary, if it isn't for you, random Korean player, I've got a line of 1,000 people at the door that'll do it if you want. So you want to shit or get off the pot. The problem in NA is people actually, dude, you know this, behind the scenes, people even say these things out loud and go, well, yeah, he is like sort of a troublesome person to work with, but he's my best player, so what am I going to do? And they think they turn to you as all like, you're going to agree with them? Like, well, yeah, you just have to fuck the whole team then and have no chance at Worlds. What? Like, what are you talking about? Like, people don't realize you have to, I think the other thing as well for me is, NA is trapped in a cycle of being stuck as a prisoner of the moment. It's all about tomorrow. It's, do we win this weekend's game? Do we do a little bit better than last weekend? Like, there's no sort of like longer term, like, you're not really developing players. You're not really developing a system. You're not really working on things that level up and then, 8 months in now, our back. No, it feels like people are just working on the same small things week after week after week after week. And that applies to Champions Queue. Because I think players genuinely, Monty, think solo queue and Champions Queue is just warm up. I don't think they know it's practice as well.
Well, and there's no pressure on these players because they're not going to get replaced. Yes. Because you only have a finite number of import slots, and the players, literally, guys, the way GMing in NA works is that you lock in like you're the best resident players you can, and then you try and fill in with the import players around them, right? And you guys say, this is another thing that I would just love to test, actually, because people say, well, I don't like LCS because it's not domestic players anymore, and I can't watch North American players. I think you guys don't like it because you suck at international competitions, and you realize you're watching a B tier product at the very best. And when we have China, Korea, and Europe that are all cast in English, you always have better choices of games to watch. Always. Okay. So I think the real reason, and like nobody would be like, Bjergsen is the most famous player in NA. He's not NA. Of course, people love Cord JJ. There are imports. People love Whippo, right? It's their personalities and their accessibility that makes you like them. But factually, guys, the import rule is preventing NA from being its most competitive because there is no threat to replace many of these NA players who are underperforming. Yes. And I think that we could have an entire league with 0 NA players, and I think you guys would watch it more if they did better internationally. I think you don't actually give a fuck that these players aren't from NA. I think you give a fuck that the games are shit, which is what I care about too.
No, the best thing, by the way, Monty, you could, for real, go back to the first year of Summoning Insight, and this is what we always told you. We always told you the reason Riot has that scuffed-ass Worlds format, and there's one Worlds a year, there was no MSI back then, is because what they want is to, as long as possible, maintain the conman pretense that NA can ever compete. And the problem you have now, Monty, is the conman tried to stay in town after he sold everyone 100 batches of snake oil. And now people have started realising that don't seem to actually get better now. And isn't that his brother who was in the wheelchair and could dance on? People are finally figuring out Riot. So the problem now is you shit out a lock, aren't you? It's lasted 10 years. You got a good run. I'll give you a fair play. You got 5 to 6 years of copium, but it's over now.
It is very impressive that you could delude TSM fans for this long. I mean, those guys are dumb, but you can only be so dumb.
Exactly.
After 10 years.
Exactly. Listen, I would have made the joke, how many TSM fans does it take to, screw in a light bulb, as many as you want, because they're all morons and you just prefer to sit in the darkness and bitch. I'm wrong. It just takes 1 million of them. It just takes 1 million. That's the answer. Once you hit the threshold, eventually they figure it out for themselves. Also, by the way, let's be real. I'm also almost certain, I've noticed this years ago, I don't need you to believe me as a random fan shitter. You can think whatever the fuck you want. That's how my content works. But I've used that tool, Monty, Reddit Enhancement Suite, which is called RES, right? It allows you, one of the features famously is you can tag a Reddit account. So one thing I did years ago as a social experiment is I tagged people who say shitty things or are biased, or even, here's a good one you might like. I didn't ever say it publicly, but I always knew which Richard Zoltz were on the CSGO sub, and I always had that tagged, so I knew that hilarious, weird account speaking in the way he does was just him wrecking everyone. Even though fans didn't for years, but I sort of liked it. It was my own little secret, So when I do this, right, it allowed me to see patterns that you won't see if you just look at random usernames. And Monty, I'm not exaggerating. Most Reddit threads are TSM fans skewing it insanely into a TSM world. That's why they even have to use that whack counter of that's not true. Because every once in a while, if Reggie does something really extreme, there's a negative thread. It's is that all it takes to get one negative fucking thread? Same with Fnatic fans in Europe, by the way. These are the fucking ultras. These are the zealots that just run. They almost remind me of K-pop stars. They just constantly control what everyone's allowed to think and the consensus. So as a result, let's be real. Another reason people thinks it sucks is because TSM was the bottom of the fucking table. You're just hating on the fact TSM sucks dick now. That's not my fault. I didn't make them suck. I actually think that's somewhat hilarious. I even thought, by the way, there's proof, by the way, also, that no one ever will watch all the games in an LCS season, because they just proved it, Monty. If TSM's last place, now everyone should be watching the bad games. No one watched those games. Everyone was I'm not watching. I'm out. Logically, TSM should have had banger last place game numbers, the greatest of all time, surely.
Also, by the way, all the fans complained about performance, not the fact that they had these new import players on the team.
Oh, no.
Just gonna point that out. Nobody was like, well, Double Lift's not on the team anymore. I love Double Lift.
Put it this way, I still don't even know who any of those players are, Monty. The only time they ever showed any personality was like mildly criticising the org or something. That's about it. They haven't said anything. Who are they? Who the fuck are they?
All available evidence points to you guys being full of bullshit on the I only
exactly.
want to watch NA players front.
Exactly. Well, we should have a segment like that, press X to doubt. We bring in the fan excuse. It's like, I'm going to take doubt on that one. Is it believe them or doubt? I'm going doubt. That's a doubt.
But besides, it's just like if NA, for example, if Team Liquid won Worlds, here's a very simple question. Do you think viewership of NA would go up significantly?
Go through the roof.
It would go through the roof, guys.
It would literally double. Yeah, for real. It would.
Go through the roof.
By the way, this isn't even something that I have to guess about. You know what, Monty? When people like in CSGO, Simple became the #1 player, and not only in RV, but 3 or 4 teams from that, the viewership went through the roof from that region, of course.
Here's a question to Monty haters, by the way. Here's a question to Monty haters. So when I first got to Korea, the Korean viewership wasn't super good. It was right after, even though we had seen a Korean team in the 2012 World Finals. So I get there late 2012 after that happens. And Korean viewership is very low. So one of these things must be true. Either Korean teams are the reason why, and their victories at Worlds, especially in 2013, and their hype finals and their performance, are the reason why people watched more of the English stream in Korea. Or it's me, guys. Maybe it was me. Now I'm not deluded enough.
Are you trying to trap him into it?
Exactly.
That's it, right? Sophie's choice one for the Monty here. Yeah, exactly.
So it was either my casting, or it's because you guys watched them because they were good, even if they weren't part of your culture. One of those things has to be true.
That's the 2 buttons meme. There you go. You know the 2 buttons meme. There you go. Exactly. So, you pick. You can pick, guys. You can pick
which one it was. Now I don't think it was me personally. Maybe I had. Maybe I kept people around a little bit, right? Yeah. Like certainly, I think I helped, but I think mostly it was like Faker. That would be my assessment.
Well, even the 2 points together, though. One thing that you and Dor inarguably did is because you both had a background as fans from StarCraft, you understood early on you have to make a character out of this guy. But guess what? If he's just a boring 15-year-old Korean kid, his character can't be his real personality. It has to be what he is in the game. Yep. So we have to create his character from the fact that, wow, Insect's such a crazy guy, all in all the time. Wow, so immortal score, never dies, like mad life. Yep. Wow, the hooks, like they created the images. Like the players did the rest, yes. But even in a small sense, that did help humanize those players, make them into the stars.
Well, we knew that was very deliberate. That was very deliberate. There were 2 things that we did very deliberately. One of them was that, which is like we have to create hooks with these players to get people invested. And the other thing we did was we created the whole like OGN Legion hashtag. So we created a fan identity for people who watched OGN, and the emotes were part of that, the the rotations and like the Doa face and like the cake fan and like we created this identity in these memes that made people feel like they were part of it was a subculture for LoL fans.
Because that was the cool thing. Basically, what they did is they made it like a hipster thing to watch the LCK. So as a result, like it was now cool that you were up live, and even though it's like in America and it's late at night and that, it made it a cool thing to do.
Yep. It was like a secret club.
And then you could just go on Reddit then and sort of be like, I am like, who the bloody hell are these LCS players? I was just watching, Flame and Shard. You're like, you can be an elitist. It's brilliant. Everyone wants to secretly be the one who knows more. You want to be a know-all, don't you? Exactly.
Yep. So that's things we did very, very deliberately at the time. But yeah, this is all to say, if you guys start winning, then nobody's gonna give a shit. It's not like Faker lacks fans. Guys, I hate to tell you this, but Faker's favorite drink is water. He's not a super interesting human being. He's a fucking brilliant player. Yeah. But he's not. He's pretty boring in real life. I'll tell you that.
It's a quick test for how committed they are to the idea about NA players. Here's an option, fans. I've just come into a VC and I've got $50 million. Which would you like me to do next year? I can bring all the top collegiate players and all the academy players and send them to a mega boot camp, and we can get Golden Glue in there, and we can have Darshan teaching them, and at the end we'll pay them all an incredible salary to play in whatever LCS team you want, or I'll sign Faker to the LCS team of your choice. Now, A, which one would you want? And B, which do you think would increase viewership? Because if it's what you say, then logically this wouldn't help really old Korean players. The LCS would have double the viewership tomorrow if Faker joined. Let's be absolutely clear. It would be tomorrow double the viewership, at least. Maybe 3 times, maybe 3.
Yep.
Right. Obviously, in a minute, we'll have our guest appearing. But on this segment, which is sponsored by Esports Bet. I want to just tell you a little bit. So not only is it the esports industry leading crypto esports odds matrix, just said esports twice there, so it should be sponsored by esports, but basically they have all the league you could bet on for real. Like you can find like Brazil, every small Turkey, PCS, VCS, they have all the major regions. Obviously some of them at the moment are finished, like there will be no LCK until summer, LEC's just finished, LCS is still running, LPL is still running. Basically, if you can think of a League of Legends league with relevant players, they almost certainly have it here. They're going to have all the bets. And also, as we said on the past segments, they have all the prop bets as well. You're not just picking who wins and who loses. So you can find a little angle that you know about the game that someone else maybe doesn't know about, see if they've priced it correctly or incorrectly. Anyway, that ends the segment sponsored by Esports Bet. And now we go into a segment not sponsored by Esports Bet. Right, we're starting off a little bit out of, it's not like a Tarantino film. We're going to start in the beginning, then the actual beginning will be, and then the end afterwards. You have to figure out what happened. Like, was I actually always sort of like a morally grey character at this point? Did something happen to me earlier in the show that made me so fucked up, doing all rants? We'll find out. So for this part of the episode of Some of the Insight, we're going to have Dylan Falco as our guest, who is a 3-time LEC championship coach. He obviously won twice with Fnatic. Yeah, I'm aware of that. It wasn't actually Youngbuck who was the only person coaching that team. I know a lot of people in their brain, they act like you left after season 7, dude. Like, he was there, you know, he was the coach, and he did win 2 championships, and now back with his boy Caps, he's just won with G2, so he's done it for both sides. By the way, even there, that's one angle where, because you took that circuitous route through Schalke, I think people even forget, that's a bit wild in itself, dude. You've essentially like won championships with Barcelona, and then later gone and coached like Real Madrid, which is, if people don't know in sports, that's like a huge no-no. That's supposed to be like, you know, you're a traitor if you do that. So it must be interesting being on the G2 side of things now, dude.
I was also on TSM as well, so I feel like that's like the trifecta. Right? There really is the trifecta there. So yeah, it's pretty good for sure.
Okay, right. Well, obviously you like having to set mute notifications on this tweet. It's partly just that's partly why you're on social media, because that's a hell of a 3 fan bases to run through.
Yeah.
At least, by the way, to have 2 of them as your exes. Well, you're a better man than I am, mate. You're a better man than I am.
It's like whichever one you're playing for, then you have like the fans from the other teams against you.
Exactly.
You know? It's great. Yes. It's great.
And then you have all the people where they're like, we get this all the time, mate, where it's like, oh, I used to really hate you, but now I love your stuff. And you're sort of like, I don't know why I would want to hear that comment and enjoy it. Like, for me, that's just a horrible comment. What are you talking about? Like, you know, whatever. It's by the by. Right, I've got a quick question for you, right, which is actually, when you were announced in the off-season that you were going to be joining this team, what was your sense of actually the community reaction? Do you feel like people thought it was a good move? Did they feel like you were the right man for the job? Did you get criticism? What was your vibe on what it was like? Because I actually thought, you know, generally I thought it kind of went with not much fanfare. Kind of people just focused on the players and didn't really seem to put too much emphasis on the coach angle, you know.
Well, I think that at least as far as like the reaction to my signing alone, I'd say it was pretty positive. I think through my time on Schalke, I actually grew a pretty good reputation in Europe for among players, staff, media, all this for my work. So I think, although like when I first came to Europe and joined Fnatic, like many years ago, there was a lot of haters actually. Actually, that was like when people didn't value my work, or I was very new in the scene. But I think this time it was actually pretty positive. But I think as far as like focusing on the coaching staff over the roster, like when there are roster moves like Reckless leaving the team, for example, like how it's hard to compare to something like that because that's such like a high profile move, I think.
Yes. Oh, by the way, just move your mic a little bit away. It's just a bit too close, so it's like peaking a bit. Oh, by the way, Monty, obviously we're going to get into talking about the glorious LEC playoffs. And anyone who knows this show knows that actually, before we come live on the show, like, often have a little bit of a snack, you know, get a bit of the calories going, because it's like a 3-hour show. You need a bit of energy. I saw you were eating on something. What is that exactly?
Oh, yeah. I have this rogue blue cake.
It's delicious.
Yeah, I mean, it does. You know,
I reckon probably wouldn't. You know what? Even now, I think I'd bet on it to win LEC.
Yeah,
is it good? Is it good?
Yeah. The frosting is
okay.
Oh man.
Yeah, the frosting's really Trimby. Remember, he was the icing on the cake. You had the substance, which was Larson's. Carrie what the fuck? That doesn't look delicious. What's going on?
No. Oh no.
Oh, what the fuck? What's in that cake? What is that? It looked delicious though. That's just such shit acting. I don't give a fuck. Keep going. Oh my god, Monty, community theatre. Oh, what is that? A razor?
Again? Why?
Whatever. Anyway, people get the point. That was obviously a razor cake, wasn't it? Because Rogue, in some ways, though, I will say, before it was slightly, here's the thing, Monty. Before it was a slightly forced analogy because they'd only been in one final. They just used to let you down earlier. Now they truly are. Like I said, the joke on Twitter, they are KT Roguester because this is fucking ridiculous, boys. How many times are you going to look like finally it's time to win and then just rug pull us all at the last second and make us all look like fools? How are you going to do? How are you just going to keep doing that to us? By the way, I've got a question for you, Dylan. For real, before you actually played the final, did you expect that like Rogue should be the favourite? I mean, interestingly, if people don't know, last year when you came on Something Insight, you were one of the people who believed in the old Rogue lineup and the inspired one. So did you actually think, was Rogue the favourite for the final?
No, I thought we were definitely the favorites.
Okay.
I think throughout the whole year, especially being behind the scene and seeing our scrims and seeing how we play against the other teams, I think that we've always been like the most skilled team, I would say. We just didn't really manage to put together on stage. And the thing about Rogue is we have scrimmed them more than any other team.
And they were like your main partner, right? Yes.
Yeah, they were our main scrimming partner throughout all of the playoffs, as we wouldn't basically face them the way the brackets were.
Final, yeah.
And even in the week before finals, we scrimmed them. And when we really reviewed and went in to analyze, like, what were they winning against us with? What were we winning against them with? It was really only like a narrow way they were winning, and I felt like it was pretty easy to kind of like target that and remove it. So I felt like we had a very good plan. I also felt that our players just handle pressure way better. When you have Caps and Yankos on your team and a really carefree environment and like a huge win streak, and you've already played in front of a crowd the day before, like that's like for the mentality aspect of it, that's like I couldn't understate how massive I think that was for our finals performance. I thought that Rogue was definitely the second best team in the league, and I thought it would be closer, honestly. I didn't think we would throw them, but I definitely thought we were advantaged.
Because the thing is, when me and Monty yesterday were doing like a watch party for this exact match, that's one thing I said to Monty is like, because of how weird the drafts looked as an outsider, and even how Rogue was choosing the draft and the side they were choosing to go on, I said to Monty, like, if you think I'd also heard that you were like the main practice part, especially when you're in the lower bracket, and obviously even in the upper, you were on the opposite sides. Like, I said that's what that screams to me of. When both teams come in and they have like different priorities, and you see that just screams like we've played so many scrims, like we're sort of like the game within a game of like we're not at the surface level of the meta here. It's like you say, you're sort of tunneling deep on what angles you can attack them on, right? Let's get into some of that.
So I'm curious what you said, Dylan, because this is one of those rare instances where you might be able to actually like reveal some of the meat because you're done. You won. You're not going to be facing this team for many months at this point in time. You're moving forward to MSI. So I'm curious what you saw in Rogue that you thought, you said they kind of just had one way to win. What was that you identified and how did you attack it?
So basically, I think over 80 to 90% of the wins against us were with a very strong range support counterpick with a tank jungle, like such as Jarvan, or enemy team having Hecarim on their team. This was, I think, most of it. And this was like at all costs what I and the team and my analyst staff wanted to kind of deny them in the draft. In addition to that, because we're doing so much of our drafting in our lower bracket run based on just like get the strongest mid jungle possible to use that to kind of pressure the map.
Okay.
We needed really stable ways to draft our bot lane, right? Because if we're putting draft resources into first picking Ahri, banning junglers, possibly picking champions like LeBlanc if they're left open, then we need answers. And another key thing going to this set is we played the Xayah and the MF counterpick into Aphelios, and the enemy didn't appear to. Right? It appeared like they did not. I'm not sure. Maybe they would have played it if that situation, but we hadn't seen it enough or seen scrims or solo queue enough to think that they actually play these. So we could kind of leverage that to put very little draft resources into ball lane, like give them the first pick of Aphelios with a bunch of ADC based band because we would always have an answer and use that to then target the strongest mid jungle combo possible.
It's interesting because you came into this week with a pretty different strategy than even the week before. And it looked to me like in terms of the stability of the bottom lane, you guys were going after the MF and Xayah, so you would have control over the wave push in bot lane and be able to control that side of the map as you saw fit. And then you come in and you move Broken Blade, you win against Misfits playing a lot of carry tops. All of a sudden now you've swapped over to having this Ornn preference and the stability. And Jankos is basically doing a Malrang impression this week where he's playing, first strike Jarvan, pulling off the level 2 ganks. And you guys just look like an entirely different team from the last week, which I thought was a really interesting shift in the way you were playing the game and the way you wanted to attack the two teams this weekend.
Yeah, I think that a lot of it had to do with just the Twisted Fate being open, whereas in the other series, TF was, I think, banned in all of the games. And I think as soon as TF was open in the drafts, the whole kind of like structure changed a lot. Like we knew Fnatic, they kind of like the TF. They picked it a lot of times. So we made sure to have anti-TF strategies, like a full anti-TF comp prepared for our set against them. So if we're going to like the earlier sets where we're either banning TF or Misfits does not play TF, we're not going to prepare an anti-TF comp, right? But we ended up running the anti-TF comp, I think, in like 2
well, if Misfits plays
TF,
you're fucking smiling, man, because that means
he's never played it once in his career, right? That's
sure.
That's the thing,
but
right?
even if they do, it's like this is exactly the wrong way for them to win. So you'd be really happy with that result, right? But yeah, I think it's really interesting too, because first off, I mean, we have to talk about Caps, I think, because his performance was much different in front of a crowd this last weekend. And I'd love to hear about his kind of development over the season and whether the crowd you feel was a big part of his performance individually. But moving over to the RE, you obviously had his famous Silas in case the TF was selected. I thought it was, and then you're even happy, like blind picking the RE, allowing the TF to be picked, and then game planning around the TF selection, even though that was probably the closest game, the third of the series, and arguably that could have been problematic for you given the early deficit that you had. But overall, we should talk about Caps, because that's what a lot of people's focus is going to be, because Broken Blade had already had a fantastic playoffs. Jankos was performing extremely well. If you said outside of just the finals, then I think Jankos is probably the MVP of the entire playoffs. And then Flacket and Targamas obviously stepping up big during the playoffs as well. But the missing ingredient was like, can Caps get back to his old forms? So can you talk about Caps maybe in a little bit of a slump this season, perhaps? Or what was it about this final weekend that really kind of flipped the switch for him again?
I think after the series to Fnatic, I took a big look at how I was unhappy with the drafts and the play style and what sort of positions it put Caps in the game. Because League of Legends is a game where if you're playing the weak side of a matchup, or a matchup where the enemy has all the initiative to kill you and you have no initiative to kill them, you just can't do things like Caps did this weekend. There obviously is like the skill and the ability to perform under pressure and like the stage hype and all of that. But I think even from like a preparation perspective, like if you look back to a lot of our losses, like the approach was wrong to enable him. And I was very, very actually like strict for this entire lower bracket run, that no matter what in our match preparation, that this ability to be proactive and to make things happen through mid jungle, which I think is just a good way to play the game. It's like Fakers spamming Ahri, Lee Sin combos and stuff like this. Like it's just good, right? But it was like
also the most
number
classic
one
way to
priority.
play European League of Legends, right?
Yeah. It was my top priority of what we were to do for these last 2 weeks. And sometimes we get ideas. Well, what if we do this? Like, oh, this champ counters all them. I was like, yeah, but look what this does to our mid jungler. Look how it doesn't enable us to be active. I think we had one game. It was the Corki versus Zir game where it was different, right? That's the one where we just outscaled them to the fucking moon. So in that game, we had to play a bit differently and switch it up. And I want to be able to do that, obviously, as a team. But in almost all the other drafts, I think there was a big priority on that.
I think that's even really smart if you think about it, because those are the two players that have all the existing synergy. If people don't know, those guys have now won 4 splits at those positions together. So, like, think about those guys know each other inside and out. And so if you can play around them, they're not going to fall apart in the playoffs. They're the most experienced players, and ideally, they're your best players. So it sounds like a great way. Meanwhile, you look at all the other teams, that's the one problem all the other teams had, mate. They're all new mid-jungle. Every one of your competitors is a new mid-jungle setup. So God bless them if they're going to try and go against that matchup.
Yeah, I also think a lot of the other mid jungles aren't playing as many like counter picks as we are. I think it's very odd that we're the only team willing to counter LeBlanc. Really, in the LEC with like actual like point and click combos, and we're also we didn't show it, but we're one of the only teams willing to counter Ari with other combos, which I can't really say what they are, but
he picks Ari in Europe.
we have combos, right, for that as well. Whereas I think like all of the mid jungles we played, like it's like they're just banning it instead, which I think puts them in a pretty tough draft position.
As far as I can tell, the counter in Europe to Ari is just don't let them have caps play for them, and then they're fucked, aren't they? So you're loving their pick of Ari, you know.
To boost Dylan's position, Caps did actually have an 80% counter pick rate, so 8 out of 10 games within the LEC playoffs. So that was much higher. Larson only had 6 out of 9 games, looks like, in that counter pick. So really, it does back up what you're saying. I'm curious for your thoughts on this as well, because I wonder if you actually had this prepared. One of the biggest, so Ari has been a power pick, especially in LPL and LCK, with a lot of these really skilled mid laners like, Rookie and Faker picking up this champion, Chovy doing extremely well on it. And at least in LPL, there has been like this counter meta that's evolved. And if you guys have seen the JDG versus Weibo series, which was basically trading Veigar and Ari back and forth. And the principle is like you pick the Veigar into the Ari so that you can either just block off zone so she can't ult effectively, or you can put her in the box so she can't ult, and you also have targeted abilities to shut her down even if she's zipping around, and you scale really well into the late game. Were you expecting to see because I would have expected Larson to pull out the Veigar because it seems like it would suit his style more or less. Was this something that you had prepped for? Because it just, the Ari pick was like skyrocketing priority, and I'm like, why isn't there a Veigar counter pick happening right now?
I think some people play Vex as well. Vex and Veigar are I think the two, but no, I think we were enemy. I don't think we didn't think enemy played these champs. Maybe they did prepare it in scrims, but we certainly did not come in thinking that they were capable of playing it. The Veigar is something that's actually a good example of what I was talking about earlier.
You banned Poppy too, which was very interesting, right?
Yeah, it's something we talked about earlier. Like Veigar can actually counter Ari. Maybe we should try it ourselves. But the thing is, as you were saying, it's a very inactive counter, right? You're really scaling. Past a certain point, it'll be very good. I'm not sure it would have been the best for us. I think it's something we definitely should investigate for the future, because it is, to me, that's like a proven counter pick. How good it is when the mid jungle is playing super good and aggressively, not sure, but yeah, I think it can be good.
I wanted to get your take, since, as I said, last year you were one of the people who, you did have Rogue as the best team before the summer playoffs. I mean, quite frankly, they are in the splits. If you ever watch them, they're a fucking incredible team. I wanted to get your take, because one of the players who always gets a lot of the criticism, understandably, he plays the most influential role, is Larson in mid lane. And I noticed even in the Fnatic series, which they won in the first 2 games, and then in the series they lost here, one of the things I found very interesting, so I wanted to ask the coach's perspective, is he's picking champions that are his bread and butter. Like, if people don't remember those first 2 games against Fnatic, he's playing his Victor. Like, he's probably the best Victor in the whole West. Then in this series, he's playing the Lucian in the first game. He even played like the fucking he played an Azir game. Like, these should all be right up Larson's alley. Is there something different about how he plays in the playoffs, do you think?
Like, they did make the finals. I think he played very, very well this season. I think he played very well in the regular season. I think he played very well in the playoffs. I guess the Fnatic set was a bit of a thriller, but I think in their victories, in the reverse sweep, I think he performed well. I think his finals weren't very good, and maybe he didn't feel comfortable enough to play a few key champions for the grand finals. But no, I think he's just good. I don't think he deserves a lot of I don't feel like he underperformed in this playoffs, at least. In my perspective, no.
I also sort of meant it from the perspective of, like, don't you find it curious that essentially you can give him his strong champions, but it actually sometimes made him look less effective? Like, in line, you were saying earlier from scouting Rogue, it seems like, I get the feel, like, here's the problem, right? When I look at the Fnatic team, because on paper that is a super team, I feel like just give them really strong champions that their players like, they'll figure it out. I don't get that sense from Rogue, dude. I feel like in Rogue, the specific comp's more important than having, like, Larson on his comfort champ and Otto on his. It almost feels like the specific, like, I get the sense if they don't know what the comp does, they just get lost completely. What's your sense?
I just feel like, at least in the finals, like the 2 matchups, I think he picked, was it Lucian into Ari, which I think should be a good matchup, but we just had very good scouting on the way they ward, and then we killed him, I think level 3 or level 4. And maybe there's a world in which we don't do this, and he actually like stomps lanes pretty hard and is good in the game.
Yeah, it was the Jarvan came from the bot side of the lane.
Yeah.
You guys did you guys did a delayed, like it was a 5 camp Jarvan clear, which is unusual timing for a Jarvan gank because they usually gank earlier, right? And then you gank for the bottom side. I'm trying to remember this off the top of my head.
I don't remember because I heard Yanko's talking about it before the game. This wasn't something from coaching staff. This was Yanko's thing, and he knew it would work, and he just did it, and he got the kill. So I guess it was good.
Also, by the way, one of those moments where you just know, like, I'm probably supposed to win this final, when people are just coming up with plans on the fly and they're just working exactly as the veteran player says. It's a pretty good sign. Pretty good sign.
Yeah, it's really good.
Sure.
I mean, also, I think one of the things to Dylan's point earlier, when they were focusing on the mid jungle synergy, one of the things that Larson didn't have was very complementary jungle mid matchups. Like, yeah, sure, you've got the Lucian, which can push in early, which is what we saw, but he dies to the gank. But also, the jungle pool was extremely pinched in that first game because G2, you guys banned 3 junglers. I also thought the Poppy ban was very interesting after like the Ahri and Jarvan came through for you guys. I was like, oh, okay. I didn't, obviously it's not a common pick, but it could have been potentially powerful in that situation. So
yeah, maybe we knew he played it because we scrimmed him or something like that.
Right.
Because it came out of the blue, but I was like, okay, this is actually like, this is a good, like, if you're pinching the pool and this champion could be good in this specific situation, it was definitely an interesting ban. But so he gets forced onto the Xin Zhao, and the setup for the Xin Zhao is not great with the Lucian lane. It's not great with the Rumble lane and top. And similarly, like they figured out, okay, don't first pick Aphelios on blue side. Let's prioritize jungle in the next game. And they first pick Volibear. But then you have like Volibear Azir, which is not great pre-6 for ganking. And
like,
then
Azir's a champ that you kind of don't play as much with your jungle, right? It's more of like a solo pick. It's like you just push mid and try and neutralize, and you'll push Corki in, and maybe you can even dive early levels if you really, really get good trades. But mostly Azir is just like pushing, neutralizing, and then Volibear in that game is supposed to just gank the side lanes over and over and over again.
Yeah,
I think one of our side lanes was Ornn. Was that the game we had Ornn?
Yes,
so
versus Gwen.
Kind of hard. And I think bot lane was also a bit harder to make plays on as well.
Yeah, and because Gwen doesn't have setup CC either with the Volibear, like you're basically playing for a level 6 Volibear dive in your solos, which is I mean, you want to do that clearly, but you also want to do it. You want to get kills with Volibear earlier on into the game. So it seemed like for me, Rogue faced a lot of issues in this series because they were, as you said earlier, picking for comfort, but the picks didn't necessarily make sense with the overall goals of the competition, or they didn't make sense with each other. I mean, in game 2, they had no way to kill the Corki, like ever.
Yeah, as soon as they picked Jinx Azir, and we had Xayah Corki, I think everybody on stage, like you could kind of feel it, that we knew that the game was going to be really good. I think this was just like an amazing moment for me because I just had to shut up, and then Jankos just explained to the team, he's like, I'm going to lead us to the whole early game. If we make this game to 15 minutes, we will win this game 100% of the time. I'm going to follow him throughout the jungle. I'm going to match his clear. I'm going to call where he is at all points. Ward, Shadow, we're not going to do anything. And then we're just going to win at Dragon. And I could just hear him running through the whole plan during the game and just doing the whole thing. And it's like, it's crazy because from a viewer's perspective, right, you don't understand that Jankos is just carrying that game like solo. Like absolutely solo carrying the whole game. But he's 0-0-0.
Yes. Well, I even said, by the way, that was the angle for me with Jankos in the playoffs. Is like everyone's looking at Malrang or Razork last year. They're looking at the pop-off junglers. Whereas, like I just said, the reason Jankos is OP in the playoffs is his fucking floor level of how he is going to play is so high. To me, it's like the other jungler has to clear that, and if they can't, he just wins. Like he wins by you just failing, essentially. Doesn't have to pop off.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I in that game too, I was really surprised that given the kind of states of the pushing and everything like that, that Rogue didn't go for earlier Dragon, because I thought the only way they could actually win the game was by, Dragon stack here, at least taking away a few so that you guys couldn't just control the objective and poke them off and like challenge Soul in that game. And they just didn't do it. Like they prioritized Herald instead and then dropped it like mid instead of top, which I also thought was weird because I thought they would want to get the Gwen rolling more so than the Azir. And then you guys just ended up taking like all the dragons in the game, getting a very easy soul. But I thought it was just kind of a very strange read on the game state and what was going to happen in that game from Rogue. Like, to me, that was the most disappointing game from them.
But that was also something. Actually, my analyst Rodrigo, in our pre-match presentation where we go over like enemy tendencies and stuff we need to worry about, there was just this big picture of a dragon with an X through it, being like, in our scrims, they actually at one point like didn't take like a dragon for an entire day or something. Like, I think Malrang is so playmaking focused that they're actually not playing for Drakes, which I think sometimes isn't bad, because I think first Drake, second Drake, like you can definitely play a playstyle in which you're playing heavy for Herald, giving up some Drakes, and then fighting the later ones. But if you're really never playing for it, it allows you kind of to stack Drakes in games where you outscale, which, for example, in that game too, kind of makes it a lot easier for us, like you were saying.
A question I had. Oh, sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, like, I was just surprised, like, that was the game plan, because they just didn't have jungle solo lane synergy for early kills, and then but they had the push, so then not prioritizing the Drake made it so they had to fight you much, at certain points in the game where they could have just avoided or tried to like trade for a Baron later, because had they set up a scenario where they had taken the first Drake or two, well, then all of a sudden you're doing Dragon like Soul Point or Soul while the Baron's up, and they've got the Azir and the Gwen, which can do the Baron really, really fast. So I felt like that was just a huge misread on where the compositions were going and what the priority should be in that game.
A question I had, because it must be related, again, I assume, to things to do with practice, but also I noticed this was a pattern Rogue had as well in the Fnatic series. If anyone saw the interviews after the Rogue Fnatic series, the Rogue players actually all kept saying that they thought their first two games drafts when they were playing blue side, they thought they actually those were good drafts and they were liking it. But when I went and looked, all my expert friends, all the people who do the shows, they thought Fnatic was like hard winning the draft. And I noticed in this series as well, they started out the first two games on the blue side again, and they only went red, just as they did in the Fnatic series, when they were in a hole of shit and they were like, right, we have to change something up. Can you give us some sort of thoughts on this, or maybe how Rogue was seeing the meta?
Okay, so yeah, there's a lot of talk on blue side versus red side from the analysts and from people, because red side was winning a lot in playoffs. I do think maybe it's a bit cocky, but we were also playing like on red side for most of our win streak, so it's going to kind of boost the numbers a bit, I think, actually.
Okay, right.
I'm a pretty big believer in blue side if you draft well in almost every meta. That's what I'll start with. I think we probably would have chosen blue side if we lost a game on red side in most of our series. I think that, especially considering teams that were perma-banning Zeri, the ability to actually set up a strong first pick, and the fact that just like statistically blue side has won more games on every patch ever and ever, makes me kind of want to pick it as a coach. But I will say, in a series against Rogue and against Fnatic, support counter pick, like, I feel like really disabled the enemy support. Like Hilly blinding Thresh against Jarvan, and us getting like really easy matchups to play bot 2v2, and Trimby not being able to play what I thought is like their best way to win against us, which is like range support combos. So it was very, very effective. So maybe if we lost, I would have made a mistake by going blue, like with hindsight on it all. But I think it's more complicated than just like red side winning, red side OP.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it in in other regions, like blue side has been, like in Korea, blue side has been preferred by most of the teams and has done very well.
By the way, since you bring up that point, another point I have to bring up is one of the big changes in Rogue this split that seemed why a lot of people had them becoming a champion is the aforementioned Trimby. Like, he was even looking like, hey, he outplayed fucking Hylissang in a playoff series. Like, what more do people want? Like, that's very exciting. But in your series, mate, he looked like he really got affected by what happened. Because, like, think about the one game where they tried giving him the counter pick. He picked Braum. And guys, if you didn't watch this game, like, they actually might have done a miracle comeback in this game, but he could never fucking ever get his ult off ever in a team fight. He just got blown up instantly every time. He never got the Ornn disable ever. He never managed it once.
Like, I kind of get it, picking Braum against Ornn. Like, I don't think it's the worst pick. And honestly, given how that game went early, I think if they weren't 0-2 in the series, if that was the first game of the series, I think they would have won that game.
They tried a few game plays. You saw, they were trying to get
they were
going.
they were really far ahead in this game. No, like my AD carry was like level 1 at like 15 minutes.
Yes,
like he died like 3 times under turret. Like at least backstage, we were already prepping game 4 draft because I did not think we would win. I think this is just a thing where I've seen it a lot throughout the years, where if a team is 0-2, even if they're winning the game, there's a lot of pressure. And if the enemy team just starts getting a bit of momentum, it can be really easy for you to feel like, oh my god, we should have won this game and now we're going to get 3-0'd, and then it becomes hard. So I do think the Braum pick into Pyke, like you were talking about at the start, it's a bit questionable because Pyke is usually like a Braum counter pick. But at the same time, it does make sense into Ornn. Like I do get it, and I'm not too sure what else he would or should pick here. Maybe he should just pick a range support and just pray he doesn't get hooked and try to play to win lane. But like, it feels bad, right? Like to just like pick Lulu into Pyke and pray you don't get hooked.
He genuinely seemed off in the series anyway, so I think he was just throwing anything at the fucking wall at that point in time, it feels like.
It was also, I mean, you could tell in that game that there were communication breakdowns going on. Like the fact that Caps was playing like Cleanse Flash Ahri and was doing like getting to side lanes faster. I mean, Larson was just like not using his ult at times. I think it probably was a communication breakdown, especially in the fight that really turned the game around in top lane, where you guys managed to like fight the turret in top side. But like, at that point in time, I think that they thought that was safe, and so they called Larson off so he could stay and put some pressure on the mid lane turret instead, because he was motioning up there. So I think that was a team call and not like a Larson individual call. But I was surprised, especially because due to the way the early game panned out, Larson had his ult way before Caps did, way before, and we didn't see any kind of like use of that ultimate. It didn't seem like they were really enabling him in order to make those plays.
Their comms in general looked really scattered in that. If people don't remember, that third game was the one where, as we're talking about, there is no fucking teleport. There was only one teleport in the whole game, and it was on the fucking rogue top laner. But they played as though teleport was still in the game, Dylan. Like, they just let Caps base like twice at least and just run to a dragon fight that they could literally have just burned down and like forced to fight. Like, it was crazy. It's like they were playing like not even thinking what the summoners are, mate. The amount of times, because we were watching the watch party thinking, oh, they could get this done. And it's like they just let him arrive before they even engaged a fight.
The Corki game was particularly egregious because like he was like in base getting packaged and he didn't have TP. And like Rogue is just standing there at the dragon. I'm like, he doesn't have TP. You guys can literally just rush the dragon right now. He's like at his inhibitor. And they just waited it out.
I think in the Corki game, the reason it's hard for them is because of the Xayah poke. Xayah was like kind of strong in that game, and that's actually something we learned from playing against Fnatic and losing to them, is the power of high range like Xayah comps at Dragon. It can be really, really, really hard for enemy team to walk in on you because you eat a Q, and it just chunks you for so much of your HP. And they were playing Xayah LeBlanc against Arphelios, so it was kind of the same. I think in the TF Jace game, I think like the fact that Jace is behind in that game is the reason that they're not secretly not winning maybe as much as they want. Because if you're playing TF Jace, I think you really need to play on sides, and I think fighting the dragons is like kind of bad. Even I think you want to do like ghosting plays and TF ult plays and like backdoors and stuff like that. Like ideally, I think.
Okay. By the way, since obviously on the weekend you did play another match, you played against Fnatic. Here's my question, right? My vibe went like this. Like, I've heard the stories as well that like G2 was confident because of how practice was going and stuff. But if I actually look at all the teams, a mixture of what I heard privately and especially in all the public interviews, dude, I think that Fnatic is absolutely shell-shocked right now. I think they really did believe right up until they lost that series that they're the best team in Europe and they're supposed to win LEC. Would you agree? Do you think they thought that?
I'm not sure. Like I'm not in
no,
Fnatic.
Speculation, of course.
I think that we always felt like we were the best team, and especially because Fnatic, like there's a whole drama with them ending scrims and like Perks I think called them out on that, and like they're just like their approach of like having worse scrims and solo queue and all of this. Like I'm not a believer in that personally. My team is the highest rated European team in any league in solo queue, and my team is the most winning in scrims of any team in Europe. And I'm like more
all the scrim bucks. And the real
that's my angle. So I guess they played better than us in the regular season, right? So and they almost got first place, and they beat Rogue, I think, the last time they faced them. So and they have like a bunch of players that won championships. So like, of course this team can be really, really, really good. But I personally wasn't a believer as much as I was in myself. But I'm also on G2, so of course I'm going to believe in G2.
Yeah, fair enough.
So do we want to rewind time and talk about the offseason a little
Let's
bit? Because I think a lot of people are going to be interested in how this team was formed.
Shall I tell that story and then he can see what his story? Basically,
sure.
Because I knew Carlos was fine with me telling this story. During the offseason, people don't realise I have a lot of connections, but Carlos is actually a friend of mine, so I also talk to her just as a mate, like what you doing with your team, like who are you getting on, maybe get this guy instead or whatever, not just as a journalist. And basically, he told me as a friend, mate, it's not just like a troll leak where someone would try out. We're really going to sign FlyQuest and Targ Armas, and I was like, I don't know about that, mate. Like the Targ Armas guy looks good, but really, you can sign that. Don't you have all massive free agents? He's like, oh no, we could actually have literally signed Viper. There was other people, and there was way bigger names in the mix, And he said everyone is going to, for real, think that we have lost our minds. They're going to flame the fuck out of us and tell us we're wrong. And I know that if I just wanted to, he said, I know that when I'm letting Reckless go, if I want my fans to actually feel good, I should just bring in Viper. I should bring in the biggest name possible to make it hype. But he said, I'm just going to literally double down that whoever scouted these players is 200 IQ and we're just going to take our lumps. Now, obviously at the time and right up until this weekend, that looked like, well, I don't know, Carlos, it might not have aged that well, mate. Viper might look pretty good right now if you could pop him in. But it worked out. So this makes me wonder, by the time they'd hired you, because if people don't know, G2, because they didn't go to Worlds, very early were already looking for players, doing these tryouts, testing people. Had they already gotten these players in the mix? How were you involved and how did this come about, this lineup?
I was basically there from the start of the rebuild.
That's cool. Okay.
It was basically when can you start? Can you start tomorrow? We're gonna start scrimming the world's teams. We're gonna rebuild the team, and we're gonna win everything. That was what was communicated to me, and I was obviously crazy hyped, coming from Schalke.
Oh, by the way, normally on this show, by the way, we're usually pretty critical of the concept of tryouts in terms of picking players. I'll say this though, it's very different to try out in the off season against other rosters that are just being made, or to try out your new roster against actual world teams, including LPL and LCK. There's a tad bit of a difference there, fans. If you follow along at home.
Also, very convenient that Worlds was in Europe so that you could, you could try out all these European players without having to move them to a different region.
That was
a huge advantage.
Basically, the vibe wasn't just these guys look good in tryouts. It's these guys are looking good against actual, real, world-class teams, mate, and they're holding up.
But yeah, basically when I started with G2, nothing was confirmed but the roster. There was no decisions made. It was probably going to be Capsiancos because it just. Why would you not?
Obviously.
But I think the rest of it was all something that was up in the air of what we're going to do about it. I obviously had worked with BB for all of last split, and I saw him scrim and play against all the European top laners. I just knew he was the best. So when I was on board, they were already kind of talking to him as a top choice, and it was just yeah, of course. I just told him, of course, it's obvious. And then we went to work on the bot lane situation, and like you said about tryouts, I think teams have done tryouts in the past where they play 3 or 6 games against another LEC team early in the season, or a team that's building rosters, and then they see who they liked better, and they choose a player based on that. And that is not. Absolutely, and some people were saying, "Oh, that's what G2 did. It's so stupid. That's why they chose FlyQuest because he got 10 kills in one scrim." No. We scrimmed with FlyQuest for almost, I think, 1 to 2 months. We scrimmed Worlds teams. We scrimmed teams like Damwon, EDG. We were both of their main practice partners for the finals week. We scrimmed C9. We scrimmed just a ton of different Worlds teams. And the amount of games we had of seeing our bot lane play wasn't 6. It was more 50 or 60. I don't know how many were, but it was a lot of games. So with that amount of sample size against that level of competition, I think that's why Carlos felt so confident to say what he said to you, Thorin, because he watched the games as well, right? And we were doing really, really well, and the team was just having so much fun, and it just seemed like a good recipe at the time.
This is the very smart. I mean, it's just incredibly intelligent what you did, because people don't realize this, and all the teams are we're going to go on vacation, but if Worlds is in your region, by the end of Worlds, there are literally no teams for the best teams in the world to practice against, and you can become their practice partners for the week or, you know, the last couple weeks of the World Championship, basically, because they don't want to show strategies to each other, obviously, and there are very slim pickings when it comes to that final week of competition, and this is the best time if you're making a new roster. So here you go, NA teams. I know none of you guys are going to do it because you're just lazy as fuck. But like, if Worlds goes through in NA as planned, and we have no indication that it won't as of this point in time, but you have this golden opportunity to be primary practice partners with the best teams in the world by the end of Worlds this year. Which is just an enormous advantage for roster building, and one that seems like you guys took really, really good advantage of.
Yeah, for sure. And it's also fun. Like, it was so fun, like, scrimming these teams and seeing the picks they're preparing. And, like, I don't know, like, for example, in the finals, there was like a Yasuo top played, and in the semifinals there was Yasuo top played. My top laner is pretty good at Yasuo top, so maybe we were playing some Yasuo top against them as like, you know what I mean? Like, you get to see. Yeah, sometimes maybe we inspired them or they inspired us or whatever. Some Yasuo. So it made the tournament really fun to watch as well.
Yeah, I'm sure they appreciate that too, because you guys can also be a little bit more experimental in those games, because you're just, you know, testing out ideas, and some of those ideas might be good and end up coming into the competition. So it's very interesting. So how fast did you guys, you know, settle on Flacket and Targamas? Because you probably did pretty extensive tryouts, but was it pretty clear cut and obvious that these were the guys you wanted?
So actually, I guess I can go into it. I think for support, it was always pretty obvious that Targamas, he was like the obvious choice. Like, he was just the best support in the ERLs. He just won everything the year before. He's just hadn't had a real shot on a big team before, so the ceiling was huge.
The BI test checked out like a motherfucker. If you looked at
yeah.
it was obvious. Yeah.
For the ADC situation, basically I had a short list from my scouting and from my analyst scouting, where we go through a lot of like stat stuff, just go through their solo queues, go through their stage games, go through all that sort of stuff, and it kind of builds like a short list of like some really like high performers. And Flacket's name was like somehow made it to like near the top of that list, and it was kind of weird, right? He's like, this guy, he was like what, 6th place Spanish league or something. Like, why is he actually performing so well? Why does he have the highest KD in the league? Hold rank 1 solo queue for an entire month. 2 months in the summer, and he got all the MVPs in Spanish league, and it's like, but is he good? His team did pretty poorly. Like, usually good players win, right? So he was an outlier. So he was someone that we actually wanted to test because he was such an outlier for where he was in the ERL system. So we made sure we played a lot of games with him because to make sure he was the right choice. So we scrimmed primarily, I think, with Flacket for about 1 month to 2 months, but we kept A/B testing different ADs in to kind of like see how he compared to the other ERL ADs. So it was actually primarily him from the start because we really believed in him and how he would fit into the team. But we tested against other good ADs to kind of see, and we came to the conclusion like, this guy's just really, really good.
It's also, it was implied to me that it was also taken for granted when he joined this team that another reason the team was constructed this way was like the classical theory of like the 2 main carry lanes and then the third one has to be sort of a tertiary. And wasn't it also implied like he understands that was his role coming in, and like sort of it's going to be like BB and fucking Caps are obviously going to be the people playing on primarily, and he has to sort of be like a prey gorilla bot lane in a way.
Yeah, when your top laner in the tryouts is playing Yasuo Yon and killing every top over and over again every game, you just need to have a good game no matter what, and we're gonna win. And it was the impressive thing for him was like he just rarely had a bad game.
Right.
And I think maybe in the start of this split, we were way too extreme on the weak side bot lane thing. Like it was too much, too much support roaming, too much giving up waves.
I'm sure it gave up a lot of the drafts as well, right?
Maybe the drafts were really bad for bot lane. Like I didn't have an understanding of what he needed in draft. He didn't have an understanding of what he needed in draft. His support's roaming to the Herald. He's dropping 4 ways, his whole bot tower, and it's just like he was the 11th laning AD out of 10 ADs in the stats list. So something is really wrong. So that's something we had to like fix right before playoffs.
Yeah, by the way, before everyone goes too far, because I've seen they're already going to go the other direction now, make this guy the God ADC. He's not even the best ADC in LEC. Look, he did a good job for their team because he plays well in their team, and they've finally figured out how to activate him. Like, all I'll say is this, boys. Think it through. Think about how lanes work. This Targamas guy seems pretty fucking good. Who were his two previous ADCs? Xmati and fucking Jezu. This motherfucker just boosts people. Like, if you are a decent ADC, you'll be even better if you play with Targamas. That is what history has shown us. So, no hate to Flackhead. He did a great job. He did his job perfectly. But I'm just saying, like, people are going to go the other. Like, 'cause I've already seen people are trying to, like, put fucking Upset against Flackhead. Like, Upset is the start of Fnatic, who they play entirely through and around. Flackhead, as we've just said, is doing the opposite role, but he's doing a great job of that. This is why it's about what team you play on, not what player you are, you know.
I think it's interesting too that like Flack had performed so well, considering that when you were trialing him, it was an extremely different AD carry meta, and before you knew that like TP was going to be changed in the top lane, which dramatically changed the way things were played in bot. All of a sudden,
at the time, exactly.
Yeah, all of a sudden, this this year we're starting with these like big hyper carry AD, late game ADs. And so for testing a new player to this level of competition on a very, very different meta and then having him adapt, I think is impressive as well.
Yeah, we were playing a lot of Jhin Ezreal in the tryouts because that was like, with the TP changes, like it was really good because top lane could, I don't know, it's just like the hyper carries weren't there yet. Powder Jinx wasn't there yet. It was different, right? So we were playing a lot of Jhin Ezreal, and early in the season we were picking some Jhin Ezreal in scrims and stage games as well, and we were like often getting like the bad side of all these hyper carry games, and it was a lot of our struggle. So like it's impressive that we tried him out and we're so good with him in that meta, but like it actually was hard when the meta switched, and it took some time for us to fix it for sure.
By the way, if we talk about some of the other teams, obviously it isn't just an interview with the coach of G2. I want to ask about your old teammate, obviously Upset. Listen, you know about building a fucking team around him. That was Schalke. People go back a few years, and people forget this, mate. People talk like this guy only ever placed like 10th in LEC. He took that Schalke team that had no business being in the semis to 3rd place in the summer split if you go back a few years.
I actually really disagree. I disagree. I think I actually reflected on this roster. I had this conversation with my team the other day. I think that we went into our stage matches in the 3rd place finals, that split, and we're like 25-3 or something against Fnatic and scrims, and we were really strong. In spring split, we were tied with G2 for like 1st or 2nd, maybe we were 2nd place for a while. And I look back at that roster, we had Odo Omne, Abadage, Upset, and then what was the support? It was Ignar and Trick. Ignar and Trick. Like, don't you think with the benefit of hindsight that roster is actually a lot better than people thought it was at the time?
Oh, it is, but here's the problem.
You know what I mean? Like what these players ended up being in the future. Like I actually thought we were really, really good, actually, and maybe
that's what better. You know behind the scenes, though. I'm not in your brain, am I? I just have to watch the official game. So if you remember, you're right. What you just said there is how analysis works. So you're like, at the beginning of the split, we're at the top. Yeah, and you fell off like a motherfucker. Why don't you have the top 2? Exactly. So if you're an analyst, you go there. What they had fell apart. It's not working. And then in the playoffs, the perception was it's upset or bust. Now, as you say, I'm with you. Now, knowing what we know now, that lineup looks way better than that. Like that looks like a team that should be in that spot. But at the time, people thought you should finish like 5th place or something, didn't they? They thought just make playoffs and fuck off. Anyway, the point I was going to make was this, is I wanted to get your take on this, because at the moment, people are being beyond uncharitable to Upset, mate. This isn't even about analysing him as a player. I get that there's a lot of boneheads who are like, but if he didn't lift that trophy like that, how could he truly be a great ADC? I'll never understand that mentality because I'm not 14 years old. But there's also the people where they're using the fact that your G2 team just beat him to say, like, he's shit, he's a choker, like, obviously, they're even, by the way. You can't win if you're a fucking fan of people don't like Monty. Because he had the audacity to say he's too good not to have won. That also means he's shit. Like, give me some thoughts on Upset. Like, where is he at? Are people too far off? Is he actually having a slump? What's your thoughts?
I think that if you say stuff like, I'm too good to have never won LEC, and then you lose,
setting yourself up.
You're gonna get some shade thrown back at you. I think you just need to be accepting of that in his position, because that's a pretty cocky thing to say.
I'm with you, but what would your actual analysis on him as a player be?
I think he plays really well. I think he's definitely one of the better, if not best, like one of the best ADCs in the league. I think he plays really well with resources. I think his teams have already. I think I said this before when I was on this show, that he's he, at least when I worked with him, this was a long time ago, right? He was very demanding of resources. He would be very demanding of calling slow pushes when he needs his junglers there, when they can dive. But to be fair, a lot of Fnatic's wins in the regular season were doing this and doing this very, very, very well. It honestly just like they also beat us, right, in the playoffs as well. They beat us, who we swept all the other teams after that. So like there is a ceiling there of his performance that can be really high. I actually don't think he played very well in their losses, and he played pretty good in our set. Maybe like a bit iffy in the Rogue set. I think their bot lane had a few things, but like I don't know how much he has influence over the way they're drafting or playing the game because I'm not part of it. But I feel like at least in our set, the way they were drafting for bot lane really wasn't enabling them to do what they do. I think like them playing Diana Thresh against, I forget what we had, Jarvan X,
Jarvan
Xayah X.
Aphelios.
Yeah, like it's just hard, I would say. And I think, and then Hilly dies, for example, to the gank in the first game at level 3, and then it's just hard in an ADC role, I feel like, to like carry that game.
I do think it's ridiculous. I mean, obviously, Upset and Hylissang in the regular season, the common consensus were that they were the strongest lane. Hylissang obviously was extremely good in the regular season, even if he did kind of face plant towards the end of the playoffs overall. But to me,
I can give you an example of how you can take a criticism and show that actually it suggests, infers what might be going on. So I'll give you an example. When people criticize Razork for this split in Fnatic, they go like this, Monty. They go, all he ever knew was how to path bot. Oh, you mean he was playing with an ADC that knows how to carry from bot, wants to have a strong bot lane, and will tell that jungler when to motherfucking turn up to help? That just means Upset was doing a brilliant job shot calling him, mate. Like, I'm only speculating, of course, but like that's an example to me of where you added something to the team. He wasn't just sat there only left clicking. Like, the point is, he knows how to win through him. And it was working. He was winning most of the regular split games.
Yeah.
What do you want? Also, I'm just going to say one last thing on this topic. Here's why it's so egregious that Upset is getting all this shit. Because I am sick and tired of this MO from Fnatic fans every year of Fnatic. Here's how Fnatic works for fans. They pick the players they love, and then they pick 2 designated whipping boys, and every time the player they love plays bad, they whip the whipping boy even harder. So the second they lost, I knew that Hylissang inting the fuck out of 6 straight games would mean a double beating for Upset. And I knew that when Humanoid shit the bed and wasn't clutch and didn't carry on TF like all you told me he would, that it would be more beatings for Razork. And that if you're fucking Wonder, you better fucking keep your head down in the back of class and not put exactly. Like, I'm sick and tired of this, because here's what you don't get, Monty. It was worse with the old lineups. Here's the joke. When they had Reckless, Hylissang was the whipping boy. They're not even fucking consistent. These guys are maniacs. So you bring in another guy who's like a better version of Reckless, and now Hylissang's the hero. And if it's Upset for, I can't handle this, mate. I can't handle this. If that was Reckless without a nameplate and he played identical, everyone would be saying how Hylissang didn't give him a chance to play the game. They would just flame the fuck out of Hylissang. But Hylissang's the favourite now, so all of a sudden it's Upset who has to take it. Because I think this is a really egregious one for me, mate. Like, this isn't. Here's the difference. I don't think Upset played like Humanoid and Hylissang did in those losses. Yeah, he didn't pop off, certainly. He didn't carry the games. But actually, I'm with you in the G2 series. He looked all right, mate. He looked like he was doing what he could, you know?
I also think it's a lot of the way that Fnatic was, I mean, Humanoid was playing. Like, you know, when you are so insistent about taking the Twisted Fate and you're not making plays into your bot lane or into your side lanes, like, what are you supposed to do? You're just on an island at that point in time, and you just have a vacuum in the mid lane that hasn't done anything and is definitely not going to carry these games. So it becomes extremely difficult for you to play out the composition, right? You can't have a TF that does nothing. That doesn't work, right?
Oh, certainly.
So
sorry, you don't have to come into the minefield of me. It's all right. I'm happy about myself. It's all good. It's all good.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
I also feel like Humanoid died to a lot of level 3 ganks this playoffs. Like, it was very, very effective strategy versus him, I would say. Yeah.
Did you when you were facing up against Fnatic, what did you take from the match against Rogue? Because, like, you guys let them have the TF again, so it was pretty clear that you know they were feeling better about it a week later. Clearly that was not the play when Jankos was rolling up with the Jarvan, and you had the Jarvan Ari into that matchup. But is that something that you guys were looking at or anticipating him taking again? Is Humanoid the kind of guy that you think is just going to be baited by that over and over and over?
I think that like the first thing we did is we prepared. So like he played LeBlanc a bajillion games against us in the first set, all 4 games. And he played TF a bajillion games in the second set. So I think the first things we did is we prepared an anti early pick TF draft and an anti early pick LeBlanc draft. Obviously, we never got to show the LeBlanc one because we ended up, I think, banning LeBlanc. All three games in that series. But we had that one prepared, in the case that it was a LeBlanc game. In the first time we played them, we put a lot of focus into making sure the bot lane situation was stable and then enabling our top lane to have good matchups and carry. And I think it was just like really bad drafts. They ended up getting like stable bot lane meant they ended up getting like really effective bot lane champs against our comps. Like they got some really good Xayah games. And more importantly, their mid jungle was just always had all the initiative in the game to do things, and that, like I said this at the start of the show, this was like the one thing that I did not want to do. So the main thing was just like actually having answers to anything they could play bot, and while just contesting all the strongest mid jungle combos we could in the draft. So the contesting was all in mid jungle.
I've got a weird question, but I'll ask it in this particular order. So as you said, you already played Fnatic and lost to them. That was the first opening match of the playoffs. Yeah. Was essentially one of the other factors I think about double elim that people don't think about is it means that the team who goes to the final from the lower bracket has more opportunities also to adapt and to fix their shit and to level up and to see what other people are doing, right? If you hadn't have lost that first series, would the playoffs have been different? Was there something to the pacing of how you figured things out week on week on week? Would we have arrived at this week anyway in the grand final?
I think like just from the behind the scenes perspective of like beating all these teams in scrims for the whole split, and then if we had gone to grand finals through winner side, I feel like we would have won as well, right? Because I just feel like we're the strongest team. I feel like at least maybe for like the pressure aspect of it, of like playing a grand finals in front of a crowd with like everything on the line. Definitely the lower bracket run helps a lot, I think, because if you have to think about it from Rogue's perspective, it's like they're just coming like clean after a scrim week into the finals with the crowd, where we had that kind of like ramp up, which I think, especially for like my rookie players, was good, I would say.
Okay. Another question I had was, obviously everyone until this last weekend was asking the question I hope, where's Caps? Like, the fuck, this isn't as advertised. Like, I came to watch the fucking strongman in the circus. Where's he? Just a fucking guy out here with a little toothpick. Like, what? So until this weekend, right, he never looked like true Caps to me. But even in terms of it wasn't even just like play. The champions he's picking, the way he plays the lane looks different. He looks more conservative. And the thing is, because I know Nelson, who obviously was in G2 the previous year, he'd also told me, this is something he said on shows, he also said that from talking to Caps had actually, I've noticed he says it in interviews himself, Caps, that he sort of changed his philosophy on like what it means in terms of responsibility to be the player, and when you get older in your career and how you'd play. Essentially, it was a lot of stuff that implied like he thinks he should sort of play by the numbers more. You shouldn't sort of gamble as much and play as risky. Can you give us some thoughts on this topic?
He said 2 weeks ago that I'm just going to give enemy no respect anymore and just play to stomp everybody. Okay. So that's what he said to me. That's what he said to me. So I guess he's not doing that thing that you said Nelson said anymore. If he says that and then he plays like he did for this couple of weekends, I think he made a bit of a mindset shift, and I think emotionally and draft wise he was, I would say, enabled. So yeah.
By the way, I've even got a totally rational way I can abstract this to fans to help them understand why it's actually logical that so many... Because the question is, why do great mid laners that always start off as a stud mechanically, smurfing on everyone on LeBlanc and all these shots, why do they always end up as a boring mage player? I'll tell you one reason. It's what Froggen told me years ago when everyone kept telling him, like, why don't you play like Zed in FaZe? He said, if you know the way my team works, if I just int or lose lane, we just lose the game. We can't possibly win. So he's like, I'm going to pick something that is safe in the lane, I will always be slightly ahead, and then if I do well in mine, then I can think about helping my teammates and opening their lane, opening the game, doing the team fight. Like, essentially, that's another factor. If think about what we talked about in this episode, if the bot lane wasn't doing as well in official games as they were in scrims, if the draft wasn't figured out, if you're just playing through, you're figuring out how to get Broken Blade going or something, like, you're gonna have different priorities as Caps in that scenario. You're not just gonna play like the most, like, think about what Humanoid just did. When your mid laner just ints out the fucking early game, it's hard for everyone else in the whole game to play. They don't get to play League of Legends anymore, fans. I know to you, you're like thinking it's solo queue, like, but I'm a bot lane. No, the map's just done at that point in time. Like, you saw in that fucking last game that Rogue was playing, they never had any map. Like, the whole map was getting taken from them. They couldn't have ever got anywhere. They had no fucking towers. Like, what do you want? Like, that's what it feels like when your mid lane's behind all the time. And he's on, like, a playmaking champion, but he's behind. He can't even make any plays. All he can do is fucking teleport to the base, isn't it? Like, he gets a free teleport. That's all he gets.
It's also true that, guys, that generally speaking, you have to think about this from like the theory of the game of League of Legends. And the theory of the game of League of Legends is, as in many professional esports, I would say most, mobility is king. The ability to reach the rest of the map and the rest of the players is king. And as you develop as a mid laner and your sense of win conditions, of macro, these things improve, you can play different champions that may not be as flashy individually, but you're using all of the knowledge from over the years in order to affect the rest of the map. And you're playing to help your teammates a lot of the time, as opposed to them dumping resources into you being an assassin. You saw this arc in Faker's career. Look at the way he started playing assassins, and then compare it to last year at Worlds, where he was basically just roaming for his teammates and got a top 4 finish. Now, he wasn't in peak shape. He's in much better shape now, but he can vary his play style as his team demands it. And even to this day, when he's playing with all these younger players, so many of his picks in the last half of this split and through playoffs were on champions where he could really effectively help out his side lanes and help out his jungler on high mobility picks. Like, this is just a great way to play the game if you're a veteran, because you're leveraging all of the knowledge you've gained. An assassin can only really do one thing, right? And yes, if you get super fed, you can delete people. But that's like the blunt force way to end a game. Whereas the finesse way is to get incremental advantages and help your teammates out who may not be as good at leveraging leads as you are, because you as a mid laner have all of the decisions possible in the center of the map. You have the most possible
I just think it's the better way. I think it's just a better way to play League of Legends like that, honestly. Actually, what you were saying about like using your knowledge reminds me of our game we played against Fnatic when we lost, actually, the one game. I don't know if you guys saw where Caps played Karma. Mm-hmm. Where everybody is like kind of like, oh, we let Aphelios carry, or Jankos, I think, also carried that game really hard. But if you actually watch what happened in that game,
he's unkillable in this game. You can't ever kill him.
Yeah. At a certain point, Caps is just playing Karma mid, right? At a certain point, where I think most other mid laners would just go to lane, he just like says, no, we got Herald, right? He says, I'm not going to lane anymore because our ADC was like 30 CS behind. Like, laning phase went really, really badly, and he was really behind in the game. And he just ran bot, completely abandoned his lane, and just lane bot for like 2 minutes. Jankos comes, they put the Herald, and they just sit there laning like 4-man bot. We funnel all the Herald money into our AD carry, push out and base, and now our AD carry is back in the game. And we end up just like we end up just winning the game. And I feel like that's the sort of stuff you're talking about, where you can actually just like he just saw it in the game. Like, he was so behind after that.
Right.
But it didn't matter, because that was actually like the way to win.
Is that anything you've tried to coach into him, or did he really just knew that was a concept you could apply?
Oh, I think that's just something he knew. Maybe from watching Magic Felix play Karma.
Fair enough. By the way, it's the reason why a few years ago I did a video where I made a distinction where I'm sick of talking about, like, when we talk about the best players in League, here's the difference. Vethio might have been the best mid laner in the LEC. He isn't the best player that plays mid lane, though, because I would pick the player that knows how to close the game, knows what to do when behind, knows how to help the team. Like, these are things that are like worth their weight in gold, guys. Sure, it's very hard to still be amazing just at the mid lane champions, but you see how it affects your team if you can do other things in this regard.
Even has better flexibility, because the fact that they had to all in on these like assassin carries for VTO, even in a meta that doesn't demand it. VTO, not to take away from what he had, was a great season, right? And he pulled out wins that wouldn't have happened without him, many of them that wouldn't have happened without him on the roster. But he's still like a pretty young and raw player. And even even in Faker's like first iteration, Faker didn't win his first split in LCK, right? It took time for him to develop, and the game was a lot less complicated back then as well. Like there was there was less of a difference at that time between solo queue and the professional scene. Like, there is such a giant chasm of knowledge now in terms of macro play, team composition, win conditions, the way that you play out these scenarios, calming with your teammates, exactly what you can and can't do. Recall timings, like all this shit is just very, very different from a solo queue perspective, and it takes time to adapt and learn all of these things. Like, it's just
by the
harder.
way, I've just realized I would be remiss if I didn't ask this question. So they let you get Ari twice, right? As I joked earlier, like, because basically I've been saying on this show this split. Like, I keep watching those amazing Asian mids play Ari, and I'm like, I love this shit. It's like we're back in season 3. And then every time I go and watch LCS and LEC, Dylan, it's like, these guys, they just become an invisible champion. Like, they're not doing anything. They're just always just dodging out. They're never doing any fucking damage. They never charm anyone in a fight. And they end the game with like a 1-1-2 score, but they lost the game. It's like, what was the point in that pick? So, are you implying, by the way, because they've scrimmed you loads, did they really think they could handle the Caps Ari, or does he just play it differently in scrims or something? Because in these games, mate, like in game 1, he was never going to die ever. He could never be caught. It must be so frustrating if you're rogue to play it. So why did they let you have it twice?
Actually, Caps told me this week in scrims at a certain point, he said, I don't want to play Ari against Rogue. I'm pretty sure they have no answer. I don't want to play Ari against Rogue. I'm pretty sure they have no answer. And I was like, but we need to practice. We need to beat Fnatic. Shut up about Rogue. Like stop. And I think we only played like one Ari game against them in scrims this week. And we played Ari maybe a bit more in the other days. So I think we hit the pick a bit. So I think that's part of it.
I don't think they expected you to first pick it. That's for sure.
Here's the thing, dude. I'm going to say this right now. If you're Rogue coaching staff, please listen to this episode. You're just going into scrims and actually doing your real draft. Everyone told me, oh, I love practicing against Rogue. And I was like, but why? Aren't they the best team? Yeah, but they just play the way in scrims they do on the LEC. So you play them and you know what they're going to do. It's like, guys, they're doing fucking Yu-Gi-Oh shit, hiding trap cards that you're activating in games. Like, there's levels to this shit. It's not just pick the best champions and play them. Like, you got to set people up. You got to. Essentially, there's a bit of gamesmanship. Like, essentially, what he's saying there, if you think about it, is Caps was willing to potentially make it more likely they lose against Fnatic to try and ensure they beat Rogue as well. Like, there's levels to this shit. You got to understand, guys. It ain't just playing League of Legends.
I mean, surely they anticipated it after Caps completely clapped, the day before.
True.
Champion. Like, surely, like, that's why it was weird for me. And like, when we were talking about like the Veigar counterpick, and sure, they may not play these champions, but it's not like I would expect a professional of Larsen's caliber to be able to take a champion like Veigar on relatively short notice and be able to play it like the next day. Like, it's not the world's most complicated champion.
You know what? That's all he had to do. I think he could do that. The problem is, he had to play an LEC final in front of a crowd and do that. And he was down 2 games and he had to do that. There's a different kettle of fish entirely, mate. Let me see him do it then.
To be fair, like before finals day, we had the same Veigar Ari discussion. Actually, we were like, we didn't really practice it. Yeah, we didn't really practice it. Should we prepare this for tomorrow as a counter? And the conclusion was we didn't really practice it. It's not practiced. It's a bit too passive for what we want to do in the game. But it's probably okay. But it's a bit too passive, so we didn't do it. So like, that was we did the same thing, right? So I don't think it's that unrealistic to not want to like prepare a pick with 1 day's notice.
Obviously, I would make a joke now. Like, what Rogue really needed was like a mid laner that can play the mages, but you can rely on him to pull out a off-color Veigar counter matchup. So does anyone know anyone like that? I don't know.
I do think TF versus Ari should be good for TF in my brain, at least. I'm not sure if it is.
Yeah.
I think we play tanks against TF, so TF can't kill the tanks, which is good. I also think they were playing TF with tank Jarvan, which we kind of bait them into a little bit in the series. And then if you have TF and tank Jarvan, like, I fail to see how TF gold card into Chem Tech Jarvan EQ is ever going to kill the Ari. And then Jarvan ulti Ari, and then Ari dashes out, and then...
Yeah.
I mean, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, in Korea, they would play TF Lee Sin or TF like something like this, where it's gold card into enemy jungle one-shots you, sort of thing.
Yeah, also TF had it was hard for TF to actually take risky plays to CC because he was going to get hit by or like blocked by Trundle Pillar, which was also a big problem because you can't walk up on TF in a team fight necessarily if you're going to get hit by that Trundle Pillar and then you just get isolated and die.
But yeah, these are the kind of things we're thinking about. We're thinking about like, okay, TF's good against TF's good against Ari, but Ari's good against Jarvan. they're probably gonna pick Jarvan because we always see them always early picking Jarvan, and we picked in just one with it, so we could do. You know what I mean? It's like this kind of like predictive. It's like counterpicking before you counterpick sort of thing.
No. I mean, I think your drafts are really good because there were just so many questions I had about how Rogue was going to win these games, and we already touched on like game 2. I don't know how they ever kill Corki with this composition. Like once Corki gets online, they're never killing Corki. Corki will just free fire rockets on them until the end of time. In the first game, like how does the Rumble deal any damage to Ahri? Ever. Right? You know, like basically Ahri has to get poked out by like a Lucian ult or an Aphelios ult or something like that. But even then, a player of Caps' skill, you can just get away from those abilities. It's very difficult to do anything to Ahri ever in this game. And if you do try and use your resources on it, well, then MF ult will just destroy you because then you don't have any CC left to stop that. So it seemed like, you know, by the end of that game, it seemed really difficult for Rogue to even deal with this pick.
Thing is, though, one of the ways you could see Rogue was lost is like the player that stands out to me, because I can't get out of my head, Dylan, is the one where they greed chase to kill an almost dead Pyke instead of just going and taking the dragon for free.
That was painful.
While you have 2 people alive and not all the carries.
While you wait for Ornn to respawn and then TP.
For free instead, they get the kill, they fight a little bit, and then everyone just backs off. Like I was like, what? Do you guys? Are you want to win this match? What's going on now? Where are the decisive calls? You got to think 2 seconds ahead, not fucking in this moment now. You can't just be like a bunch of solo queue noobs, just all for hit the support, I want the kill. Like, what the fuck's going on? Like, this is some shit.
I was rewatching that third game this morning, and then watching them like kill Broken Blade, like catch, get the pick on Broken Blade on Ornn, and then fight that fight, win it, and then run around for the entirety of the Ornn respawn until Ornn respawns and TPs in.
He comes back.
I think but Dylan touched on this earlier. I think once you're down in the O2 hole, you get really desperate. And you start making very weird decisions.
I've got a question for you that's a more light-hearted question. What do you think, Dylan, of Malrang's builds and rune choices? Because there's some very interesting ones. I've noticed a lot of people seem quite critical. What do you think? Because the thing is, I love his style of play.
Yanko started doing it, so...
Listen, it's spreading now, mate. Yankos is doing that Jarvan first strike as well, so come on, give us some thoughts. Come on.
Okay, so I saw a lot of first strike junglers and scrims in the G2 versus Rogue scrims throughout the week, and I was a bit skeptical about a lot of them, I would say. At least for the Jarvan one, Tank Jarvan looked pretty strong in our scrims, and I think it is good. And I think, at least logically, first strike seems to proc a decent amount on Tank Jarvan. And the other rune choices for full tank Jarvan, when you do 0 damage, seem like kind of useless. Also, at least statistically, like if you look at win rates, first strike Jarvan actually does pretty well in solo queue over a big sample of people actually playing the rune. So it seems to at least match a champion and an overall level of play. So I think it's fine / good. And I thought it just looked good. I saw a lot of games of it looking good, and it looked good. Seeing first strike tank on a bunch of other junglers that were all played throughout our scrims by both my jungler and enemy jungler, I was a bit more skeptical on, to be honest. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure which ones he actually ended up playing on stage. So.
Problem is, being a jungler is just such a thankless fucking task anyway. It's like if he wants it, bloody give it to him. He's already the dog anyway. He's going to get fucking blamed. So let him have whatever the fuck he wants. Just give him it. Go on. We've got to give him something, guys. Come on.
Nice.
Exactly. I've got a question then. Right, if you do think, because obviously you saw the scrims, you know what the team was building towards, you know the career path, right? If you have G2 as the best team and they did win, etc., what is the future for Rogue now? What do you think Rogue does? Do they come back in the summer better? Is this just who they are? By the way, they've leveled up as a team. They did better than they did past. What do you think for Rogue and their future?
Like, I actually have a lot of respect for Rogue as a team. I think they're the only team that we could consistently practice against, get good quality games, go relatively even with, and challenge us in both draft and play. I think we perform better than in the finals, but I think they will be good next split. I'm not too sure if I could see them like getting like way better, but maybe I could see it. Maybe like they integrate Malrang more because he's like obviously an import player, and maybe he gets more comfortable and they get more synergy. But I think they'll be good. Like I could definitely see this team going to Worlds. Like they'll be a top 4, top 3, top 2 team for sure. I think they're just good.
Fair play.
I mean, I don't know what you do. Like they've already made all the moves, right? It's really difficult. I think they had a bad day in the finals, right? I think that their drafts were quite odd, and I think they misread the meta and the situation and their opponents. Part of that could have been for all we know, they were actively prepping for Fnatic and then had a less than 24-hour turnaround to figure out how they were going to play up against G2, which is a very real possibility. And I think it's hard to suggest that they make any changes because of how good all of their players were for the vast majority of the time. It looked like they had fixed a lot of their mentality issues by being able to reverse sweep and being in a tough situation. By all accounts, from talking to people over at Rogue, they were in really good spirits. Like they felt like, I've talked to multiple people at Rogue who have said that they feel like the team atmosphere is much better than it was last year. And so they were very confident. And I think that continues. So I wouldn't change anything right now. Like, what do you change? I think it was hard probably because some players react differently to crowds. Trimby, I think, didn't have a great series, but he had a really good split. And I think maybe the nerves got to him. It was his first time ever in front of the crowds. It's a final.
Exactly.
Like that's fucking hard. Targamas and Flacket did great, but not every player is going to do great under those circumstances.
And look at what he's doing. Like, he's not playing, it's not like fucking season 2 and he's just playing Soda and like Agitail. Like, he actually is playing playmaking supports that he's doing counter picks for. Like, there's a lot of pressure on his shoulders. Like, essentially, we did bill him as like he's the Hillesang fucking 2.0. Like, it's time for him to win and be like, by the way, people were envisioning if he wins, he might be like the MVP of the finals or something. So yeah, I think if I'm them, by the way, I'd just run it back. Just run it back and hope players reflect on things. If they have any issues, if they think they had any performance anxiety, work with someone, think through what you can do, get little techniques. But I would run that back in an instant if I were Rogue, mate. The team's so good. The roster's mega.
I just think that, shit happens in your first, stage game. It's like first audience, it's the final. Like, you just hopefully the audience continues to come, and that's an option for LEC, and he'll have a lot of audience experience by the time that rolls around. Did you notice any, Dylan? Did you notice any nerves or anything from Flacket or Targamas in that situation? Because they obviously performed very well, but was this something that you prepped your players for who maybe haven't done this before?
I think like the handling pressure stuff is something that we talk about a lot as staff, to try and create the right atmosphere for the players for. Actually, this was like a lot of behind the scenes discussions of like planning our days in a way where everything feels very routine, very like repeatable, structured, and that everybody is always like as calm and happy and fun as possible. And I feel like if we try and create that environment from like the higher level, that it kind of like bleeds on down. Because like if the people above you are feeling, you can see them being nervous, or if they're too hyped or overexcited, it can wear off. So we put a lot of effort into it. But I think ultimately, even if you do like a perfect job as staff on it, it's like some players can just handle it better than others. And I think our players seem to be the type that handle it pretty well, I would say.
By the way, I alluded to it at the beginning of the episode, but like, essentially, the 2 splits you did win, people just go like, those count for Youngbuck, and that's how the narrative goes on that one. There's no fucking Youngbuck in G2 right now. It's pretty cool to win the split, right?
Yeah, for sure. But I feel like...
Are you the best coach?
It's so hard because every coach I think has a different role on every team. Like what I do is not what the other coaches do. It's not like a top laner where like both people are just like running to the top lane with champions.
Yeah, of course.
Like the staff roles are so much looser defined. Like what I did on Fnatic is different than what I did on G2, which is different what I did on Schalke. I feel like I've become very, very good at my job. I will say that. Like I feel like I've improved a lot throughout the years, and I've like learned so much from like all the people I've worked with. So I'm happy at least with where I'm at.
So way through that line in at the end, Monty, like, and I learned so much from all the people I went. So Youngbuck, yeah, you get your credit as well, mate. Everyone does. Love everyone.
Well,
love
I mean,
and peace. Then again, if you win, you can be magnanimous, I guess. You don't have to shit talk anymore.
I mean,
fair enough.
It must be exciting though, because the move from Schalke, you have, I would assume, more resources available to you, which means you get to structure the team probably in exactly the way you want. So what were the changes that you really wanted to make and did make from your time on Schalke to your time on G2 right now?
Actually, we're running a pretty similar coaching staff to what I ran on Schalke. We have just my analyst Rodrigo, who is like really, really, really insane at his job. And then we're looking to work with some research analysts for some like outside stuff, but it's actually mainly a pretty small coaching staff. I think the management we work with, like with Romain, I'm sure everyone saw him in all the body paint at the studio. Like that's like a huge game changer for like the whole team atmosphere. And like it's not a coaching role, but in a certain
like a glue guy,
in a certain way, it is also a coaching role, right?
Yeah,
Like, he is offering a lot of energy
pushing
and
the
a lot
mood.
of like. Yeah, exactly. So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, he's always brought that energy too, which is really
of course
been one of the things that's always been fun about.
By the
watching
way, people are going to think that's just a silly thing that people are saying because you want to big up the guy because he's in the org. No, like if they don't know, there is a concept that I learned, and it's a really useful that everyone watching the show can apply this in your real life, and it will help your relationship. It's called a state break. When someone is in a certain mental state, you have to figure out techniques that can snap them out of it and shift them into another one. So famously, like you say a joke, or you distract them with something, or you remind them of something. Like that's a big deal. If you just leave people to their own devices, then who the fuck knows where their heads are or what their energy levels are at, and they won't be aligned with where you're at. I think that's a very underrated aspect of teams, by the way, is like setting the culture in that regard. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to put body paint on and do that. That part's a separate preferential choice. That's not actually essential to the thing. Like Papa Smithy's like, just fuck it. So I shouldn't put the body paint on. Fucking that suit back on. Right. Okay. Thorin.
Oh my god.
I did think it was funny that Romain was like in there between games, hyping up the audience and stuff like that for G2 during those finals, just like popping out onto the stage.
Yeah, it's good content when there's a pause in the game for sure.
I want to talk about double elimination because you guys have now qualified.
You're probably a fan of it.
Yeah, you might enjoy it.
Just a guess.
Weirdly. But it's going to be obviously a continuous topic, especially because you guys just had this great lower bracket run in the last several seasons of LPL. Like the eventual champion has come through the lower bracket all of last year. In fact, both splits last year, the champions come through the double elimination losers bracket. So this is something that I obviously love and am a huge advocate for because it allows teams to be able to adapt. And I think that you guys really showed the power of that this time around. So what are your general thoughts on double elim and whether it should be used at MSI and Worlds as well?
I think double elimination just leads to more accurate results. That's usually what
Correct answer.
A more like that's like I know like it's like a tournament math thing, right? Like it just leads to more accurate results, and I like that as a competitor. Like I want to feel like if I won, I was the best team, for sure. I think the way MSI is, like, I don't even know if double elimination would bring that much to the tournament because it really is just a semifinals into finals tournament, and there's usually only 2 to 3 competitive teams in the tournament as well.
I'm going to stop you right there.
Yeah,
you are technically correct, but you're just going on the assumption that MSI has to be this way because this is what Riot does too. They're like, well, it can't possibly work because of the system we created prevents that from happening, right? So
are you saying no group stage and then there's this double elim bracket like that? Is that what you're going to say?
I would say that literally anything is more exciting than MSI's format, which is just a piece of shit. But also, if you just did a giant double elimination bracket with all the teams and just did a fucking big tournament, it would be sick. Like,
I'll give you an example. You're all going to think only, like we're talking about, of the big man. You all want to see LCK versus LPL twice and EU versus anything. Yeah, we're going to get all that. But here's where it would be sick as fuck. Think about the last year's MSI, where that PCS team was way better than anyone thought. Imagine if they're in the low bracket and they're doing some epic run, beating Cloud9 in a best of 5, and then they'd be like, that would be incredible. Imagine they played Mad Lions in a third place game. Like, I would love to see that shit, mate. That could be incredible.
It's not even that, guys. Like, it's even better for the regions that are worse, right? Because, well, now we just get a best of 1 between like Japan and Turkey or whatever. But imagine if those fan bases had like a best of 5 to go against each other, and you could actually see a competitive match in the lower bracket, even if it was just in the first round of the lower bracket between teams of similar skill levels. Like, that's the problem. It's like, it's the same shit that we've seen one best of 5 between NA and EU in the last 3 fucking years. And I want to see that matchup. You know,
Yes,
it's not going to be my favorite match, but do I want to watch it? Absolutely. Would I rather watch a best of 5 between Turkey and Japan than like a single best of 1 and then watch them get smashed, like Galaxy smashed over and over again by top tier teams? Yes, I would rather see that, right?
Actually,
So
it would be a banger because actually, I'm thinking about how the bracket would just work, and it would be either like Korea versus China, or EU versus China, or Korea versus China in winners finals in most cases, and then lower bracket would always have these matches of like all of the like close teams fighting each other in best of 5s too. Yeah, I would just be insane.
but
for sure.
here's the other thing. It's like the narratives are just better because we never know who's the best minor region team because they all just get eliminated in the group stage and we don't really see them play against each other for the most part. Like you could have the minor region champion, like who's the best among the Japanese and Brazilian and Turkish and Russian teams. I mean, obviously Russia's not going to happen this year, but the point is that the tournament format, you could actually just like whittle them down and then have them have a shot in an elimination game against a major region. And it would just be more exciting. It would just be more exciting.
Yeah. I think maybe what they wouldn't like, if I were to guess about this format, would be there'd be way too many days where one of the top regions doesn't play. Whereas in this current format with the group stage, almost every day of the group stage, a Korean or Chinese fan can tune in and watch their team play one game, and they will stick around to watch some of the other games of the broadcast to watch their team. So I think maybe that would cause a viewership hit, or it would be less exciting for fans of only one region. But maybe for people like us, it would be more hype because like we would just watch all the games anyways, right?
The problem is, by the way, that actually is, in a nutshell, the problem with League of Legends esports. League of Legends esports is designed as a show you watch from minute 1 to the last minute and you watch every game. And the idea is you're just a fan of League of Legends. Whereas when I follow like CSGO, my native game, I don't watch every game. Like I watch a small team play if they give me a reason to. They did an upset, they play on a usual map in a way, you know. Otherwise, I just focus on the big teams. I turn up for the second semi-final if that's better. Obviously not semi-final, maybe quarter-final then. I've skipped the bad quarter-final. Like, Riot has a different philosophy on how they think their fans watch, I think. So I'm just in a different world to them.
Yeah.
Whatever.
I mean, it's also just not how sports operates, right? What's so weird to me about what Riot does is they're like, we want people to be a fan of League of Legends or a fan of the LCS or the LEC and watch all of the games. But then they design their competitions to be based off of American sports leagues where almost nobody watches all of the games and you're just a fan of a particular team, which makes the number of games reasonable to watch, right? Like I'm watching 16 NFL games, or 17 now, I guess, of my favorite team every year, but I don't really have to watch all of those games. Or
one game a week. Each watch one game a week.
Exactly. So like that's why the number of games is manageable for the fans. Whereas they're like, the expectation here is that you watch, 10 games a weekend in your favorite league. I mean, the number of games is just insane that they like expect you to watch.
And by the way, I'll just throw this out there because this concept might actually blow the mind of someone from Riot. If I'm a fan of one team, that's right, I'm not an American sports fan. I'm a fan of one team at MSI. If I ever turn on the stream and you've advertised that they're playing at a set time and they already have played their game or it's already begun when I tune in, you have utterly failed your job as the tournament organizer. Like that, you only have 2 international tournaments per year and I can't even know when I tune in when the game starts. That is mental because you're basing it off sports like Monty just said. Can you even imagine, Monty, if I turned on for Super Bowl Sunday and it turns out, Monty, they just started 2 hours early and the game's almost over? Like, that would never work. That could never work.
I think it's a really big problem, especially as the esports demographic gets older. And you have to know when things start because you have other life obligations as like a working adult or somebody like me who has kids. It's really difficult to keep up with all of this if you don't know exactly when the games start. You need to know when to watch your favorite team play. And I think that as time goes on, if people, and I hope they do, want esports to be a lifelong passion, they need to change the way that they structure things in order to make it palatable for adults. And, I guess to your point, Dylan, earlier about, they want the Korean and Chinese fans to watch. Again, I can see that if that was true in a league setup. But the thing about tournaments is that tournaments are so inherently exciting that you feel like, if I miss a game of, my favorite sports team, I don't really feel that bad about it. But if I miss a playoffs game, I'm going to feel really fucking bad. Or even if I miss a playoffs game of 2 other teams that I'm interested in, or like a team that I think might have is hot right now, for example, coming in and might pull off an upset. Like, I tend to watch most of the NFL playoffs or whatever, right? So I think in a world where MSI isn't that many matches in a 3-week tournament, you can actually, if you're smart about how you advertise the games and about how you tell the stories, I think you can get those Korean and Chinese, fans to watch these events. At least from my experience in Korea, the Korean fans were always excited about the Western teams at Worlds and they wanted to watch them. So I think if you add stakes in there where they might get eliminated, then it becomes much more fun for people.
Yeah, I could see. For me, watching it would be hype. I was trying to think of the other side as well.
Sure, yeah,
that's fine.
I mean, I think honestly, the real answer is they want a guaranteed minimum number of games that teams play because they want to feature like Brazil and say you're not going to get eliminated in 2 days. You're at least going to have a few more games, or like you're going to be able to show off against some of the best teams in the world and have those experiences. But I mean, the way you seed the bracket would be fine. Like, you just seed them against the good teams first. Obviously, you create a world ranking system based on, I mean, they basically already have that with the pool 1 teams, pool 2 teams, and et cetera at Worlds. So you could just do that again, right?
So I'm missing something. No one's paying to watch this shit. Why are we now catering the tournament to how much Brazil is featured? Spoiler, if Brazil gets really good, they can play till the final. I'm not making the whole fucking tournament for the guy who should go out on day 1. Like, at the end of the day, if we're at the point where we have to crowbar Brazil in, make it WWE. Just have the semi-finals and then be like, wait a minute, is that Brazil's music? Oh my God, it's not actually T1 playing, it's fucking, I don't know, even losing Red Canadians or something. And it's their music, and they're playing Turkey. Can you believe it in the semis? That'll be the most hype match of all time. You get all the viewers.
And I think, like,
if you sports, though, be a terrible sport.
If you don't want to watch the really one-sided matches in the first round of the tournament, you can just skip watching. You just know, well, I'm just going to start watching in the second round of the tournament when some more interesting matchups take place. It would honestly be, that's the best part of the tournament, because in the winner's bracket, you see good matches, and in the loser's bracket, you see at least competitive matches, even if they're not the best games ever.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
And I think for Worlds, I think like everybody would agree with double elim in some aspect for Worlds. Like, it's just that's just a no-brainer. Like the MSI one, I could see it, an argument given like the hierarchy of teams in the tournament, but like Worlds, like, do something different than whatever it is right now. Just something different would be nice, I think.
So I need to hear from your perspective too, because unfortunately, the nephews have come out in force. We have a new generation of Zoomers who think that there have to be bracket resets. And I successfully destroyed this perception amongst older fans. I did it finally after years of telling them, no, in a 8-team bracket, if you lose in the first round, you can play 2-3 extra games, matches in the lower bracket. You have to prep for these games. There's the threat of elimination. In your case, you literally have to play the day before the finals, which is exhausting. You have to show your hand. So explain to the fans, explain to all the nephews out there why it is so fucking hard to do what you just did in the losers bracket.
It's hard because it's just a lot of opportunities to make a mistake. Like, I think that's just what it is, right? Like, you need to actually win over and over again, and every time you're competing against someone, like, there's just a chance of losing. In addition to that, from a preparation perspective, you got to prepare for all these different teams. You need to constantly be adapting. Yeah, for sure, it's like, it can be tough, but I do think there is like an element of momentum to it too. Like, there's a good part about it. And when you talk about bracket resets, are you talking about like grand finals resets?
Yes.
For the
grand finals reset?
Yes.
Yeah. I've like been in a lot of tournaments and like fighting games and stuff where they do have resets.
Those
and
games
like,
don't take 5 hours to play best of
and
5.
Yeah, I know, exactly. And like the resets are so hype actually. But
in fighting games, yes.
In fighting games, but they just can't for League. Like, it just doesn't.
Yes.
I do actually understand why people would not be happy with like the bracket reset where one team only lost one best of 5, one team only lost one best of 5, and then one team wins the finals, right? Like, that from a logical perspective, it makes sense.
What
we just did.
She just nailed it, mate. Here's the problem: if G2 had lost, maybe we would have heard anything.
Yeah, but you actually can't Like, I just don't see a solution, basically.
There's no option, exactly. Yeah, we all acknowledge it's not perfect. In a perfect, most like pure sense, we just have a bracket reset. But it's just at the moment, no one's ever figured out, because the final's so important, how to make that work. It's just never been figured out. And by the way, say as well, I actually think there's the underrated part. People aren't going to understand the disadvantage you had because you 3-0'd all the series. Imagine if, guys, that was like Fnatic last year, where every series was 5 games. Mate, you have nothing when you get to that final. They've seen everything. They've seen, like, not only your emergency, they've seen every break glass in case from it. Like, all that shit's gone. In fact, the joke is, I'm now going to spin it and I'm going to be the hater because I'm actually going to also blame Hylissang and Humanoid for Rogue losing the final. Because if they could have just drawn out to 5 games, then maybe Rogue would have seen more drafts. Then they could have, you know what? It's Humanoid and Hylissang again, their fault. Exactly. I'm the Fnatic fan now.
Wait, you also would have had hours less prep. Your players would have been more tired. Like, if you had gone to 5 games in that previous day, that just cuts into your prep time that you would have had for Rogue.
It ended at like 11 p.m. or something mad, wouldn't it? Yeah.
You know what I mean? You guys, I'm sure you guys remember. You remember the old MLG extended series?
That was
that was the worst thing. That was the worst thing ever created in esports.
All you need to know is one time a player from SK, which was my team at the time I worked for, played in one of those brackets. And because if you know MLG, it was like a bracket that went into a big double elim bracket, right? And because he'd lost 2-0 in 2 best-of-3s, he played a series that was a best-of-7 where he had to win 4-0 in a row or he could not win the match. Meanwhile, if he played anyone he hadn't played before, it's just a normal best-of-3. Like, that might be that I know why they did it. They thought it was a good solution. It was in reality, it was one of the worst applied techniques I've ever seen. It was terrible. It was so bad. It was so bad.
So yeah, and this is all to say, your other solutions also suck balls, guys. Giving a team a map advantage or playing a best of 7 with a map advantage. Let me just tell you right now, you think this was unsatisfying. Try having a winner of a 2-2 or 3-3 final. That is literally the biggest fucking buzzkill of all time.
Yes. I actually think, by the way,
and you already have an advantage. You have side selection first. There are built-in advantages.
Side is an enormous. Getting a pick side in game 1 is potentially an enormous advantage. Yes, of course.
Especially like last Worlds finals. I'm not sure if the blue side team actually won. I'd actually think they maybe didn't, but like that tournament, there was like 3 locked bans on red sides. It was really disgusting. It was like Lee Sin, I forgot what it was. It was just like you had like 3 OP picks, and one pick countered the other pick, countered the other pick. So you just like had to ban them.
Yeah, I also think that even if you did a bracket reset, at least in League of Legends, I actually don't know how much it would change most of the time. Because at the most, even if you did a bracket reset on the next day, so normally, by the way, that wouldn't be possible because you've rented a fucking stadium and you can't just like rent the stadium for a day that you don't know whether you're going to need it or not because we don't have enough money to do that. We're not a fucking basketball team that can play a best of 7 and like not know how many like days we're going to use the stadium. It has to be booked like a year in advance. So you'd have to play it all the same day, and you can't play 10 games of League of Legends in the same day. That's actually just impossible for professional teams or casters or anybody. It's not reasonable. But also the reason why in bracket resets of shorter games you can do it is because there's less of a margin for error, right? In a fighting game that lasts 5 minutes per game and you're playing like a best of 7, like in League, when you have an hour of game time or 45 minutes of game time, including the pick and ban, there's a lot that can happen in those games and a lot of ways that a team can fight back. And I don't think necessarily that this result would have changed even if there was a bracket reset because it was very clear. And if a team has that good of a read on an opponent, that opponent has many chances over the course of a best of 5 to come back. Rogue was just slapped, guys. They were just fucking slapped. So I don't think that another best of 5 would have saved them. I think the result ends up being the same. Because you can fight back within the game, and there are so many decision points within a game that it becomes easier for teams to actually come back in a best of 5, as opposed to a fight.
I'll even give people some food for thought. If you want an alternative that you've never heard of, if you haven't followed CSGO, I think actually ESL made a very interesting format. You'd have to go back to 2019, but go look at any of the ESL 1 or IEM events of that year. And what they did is this. The group stages, there are 2 groups, but they are 8-team double elim groups. And then what you do is, when you get to that winner's bracket final match, the winner just goes to the semi-finals, the loser goes to the quarter, and the winner of the lower goes into quarter as well. And what they happen is then the playoffs is single elim, but it's 6 teams, there's 2 quarters, 2 semis, and a final. What's great about that is it's way more likely that your single elim bracket is going to be good because it's only at the end of the tournament and when people have had loads of games to play to test how good they are. So you're playing single elim then, but then it addresses the compromises you have to make, renting a stadium, not having a million extra games, having people play 1 game a day. It's actually quite a good system. When I looked at that, all I'll tell you is I thought the results were fairly consistent.
Yeah, basically you use the seeding of groups to seed people into more advanced stages of
from a very robust format. So it's like I say, I think that's the best compromise I've seen.
LPL kind of does that right now. It's just they do it with double elimination. So it's even partial double elimination, which I think
they do kind of an opposite bit in the playoffs. So it starts single and goes to double. Yeah.
So very interesting, guys. But this is all to say that if you ask any player if they'd rather go through the losers bracket and play more matches or through the winners bracket, you're just going to say winners bracket.
I've just realized something. Here's the question, right, Dylan? As it is right now, when we arrive at MSI, do you actually expect the entire meta will be different? Will some of these things carry on through?
It's going to be different. It's always different. They patch the game, like they always want it to be different. I haven't looked at the patches too much because I don't look at the patches until I need to for my job, just so I can kind of stay on one patch.
I also, when I was casting Dylan, I literally would not look at patches until they hit the professional game, because otherwise I just get fucking confused about what's live and what's not. So I would be like, okay, well, we're switching patch now. Time to learn this patch.
But I think it will be very it always works like this, where there's always like 2 or 3 new champions, and it kind of depends, right? Sometimes the new champions completely change the landscape, because they're just like, the counters to them are new champions, and the counters to those counters are new champions. It creates this whole little thing. But sometimes it's actually just similar meta with 1 or 2 key champions nerfed. So I saw there's some Yone and Yasuo buffs on PBE right now. I like that for my team. That would be really fun. I would really love that, actually. So I hope they go through, and I hope maybe they even juice up those buffs a little bit. It would be nice.
Yeah, I wonder when they're going to lock it in, because there's still quite a bit there's over a month until MSI starts at this point in time, if we're to believe the mid-May dates that have kind of been leaked. I don't know if they've actually been officially announced.
I don't know. I know NA is playing finals. NA is playing finals so late, no? They're still in playoffs. So it's
LPL was also delayed, so they're going to be playing. They're going to be playing playoffs the same weekend, which is the weekend of the 24th. It's like the 23rd and 24th are the LCS and LPL playoff dates. So it's going to be really quite late for them. But honestly, there's still plenty of time, because they have a couple weeks after that to get over to Korea. Do you guys have
usually play-ins? There's usually play-ins as well, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So.
Yeah. The garbage stage, I think, is starting on May 12th or mid-May.
Even though the meta will be obviously probably totally different by then. The reason why is I wish we could just can this meta now and see all the teams play on this patch. That's what I would love to see.
It would actually be fun.
Because for example, I want to see your team play against fucking Faker on Ari. I want to see how you guys enjoy that shit when you can't possibly ever get to the guy and kill him. Meanwhile, just picking your players all day long and you just watch it. I was saying in this, the worst thing was you can even see in that final, when the players just give up even trying to get the Ari. They're don't even fucking focus it anymore. You're well, this game's over, isn't it? You can't just let the fucking carry. Oh, there's another thing we didn't even bring up as well. I wanted to ask you this, right? Did we essentially also get a skewed vision of those Ari comps, though? Because, for example, in that first game, every bloody kill was going on to the Ari. I think it was up 6 kills, the first, 20 minutes or something mad like that. So, were those a more extreme version, or is that what those comps are supposed to do? Are they usually that effective in scrims?
I think it's extreme versions, but I also think that it's the drafts just made Ari broken. You know what I mean? When the enemy jungler is a tank Jarvan, Ari is going to be pretty broken, right? Just think about how these champions interact with each other.
Yes.
So I think a lot of it is that obviously it's a very high prio champ. It's I think the best performing mid laner in high-low solo queue.
Among good players.
Yeah, it's the best performing mid laner in the finals of a lot of major regions. Obviously the champ is just good, but when enemy doesn't play the counters and they're drafting like bad champs into it, then it's like it gets extra OP. And Caps is playing it, I guess, to be nice to my team.
Helps. Yeah. No, the other thing I would say is this is actually one of the times when unironically we're going to invoke the freak doctrine, which is that if you just remove every game that a good player played on it, it's a trash champion, isn't it? It's just terrible. If people don't shout out that Rumble one from last year at MSI, that was one of the stupidest arguments I've ever seen. The difference was though, we're using a legit one where it actually does show that. He just did that as like a weird get out, like you can't lose apparently. So
actually, I was a believer in Rumble mid on that patch. Actually, I was a believer in that.
I think he was for jungle though. I think it was Rumble jungle at the time. Yeah, that was the thing. He wanted Blabber playing it or some shit. Yeah, exactly.
No, it was, but yeah, I do think like that's one of the fun things about this meta is that we do sometimes you get those champs that are just like great players are just incredible on them, and then kind of mediocre players are actually
Vex
bad.
Is the same thing. I think Vex is in that category as well. When I watch like the fucking sick Asian players for Vex, they're unreal. And then I watch the Western players, I'm like, see why people aren't scared of that champion there.
I want to see rookie. I want to see rookie
sure.
Vex at MSI if he makes it. That would be the best because like we were doing research right into counter picks and stuff like this, and he really likes playing Vex, and I think he hit like rank 1 or rank 2 on Korean solo queue, and Vex is his most played. And like this champ is so hit or miss. Like you miss your ult and your champ doesn't do anything. But if you hit your ult, you could just like pentakill people and do so much. So like I would really like to see that.
This does, by the way, low-key look like one of those bullshit years where like the script has been leaked, Monty. Because like MSI is going to be like Faker, Caps, Bjergsen, Rookie. Like, nah, yeah, all right.
Yeah.
Build hits, Jumping Jack Flash, fucking the Rolling Stones. We all know. Okay. All we need now is Maple to go or something. Like, give me a fucking break.
If the LPL even makes it, because now it's looking like they may not even go to MSI with the current China lockdowns, because they would have to basically, like, for you guys who don't know, there's a lot of conversations about the Asian games because apparently like those are more important to LPL and LCK for reasons. I think it's important to the Chinese government.
Nationalism, I'm guessing.
I think it's very important to the Chinese government. So the rumors are that basically like the LPL team can't go because due to the Asian games, they're going to have to play all of LPL in like 4 or 5 weeks, which would mean that there are like 4 best of 3s of LPL 7 days a week. So rip Dom's voice, I guess. I don't know how he's going to survive that. He's just not going to be able to live stream it all. But, you know, jokes aside, like that's a hugely condensed schedule. And because of this condensed schedule, they don't have time to do the quarantine in China that would be required for them when they come back from Korea. So I guess the options that are rumored that are on the table right now are that the LPL team is either going to play remotely from China or just not attend. Or I guess maybe they get a government quarantine exemption. Like who knows what'll happen? But those are the rumors right now.
Indeed, I hope no one ends up trapped in China.
Well, I mean, it's a matter of just being in quarantine after they get back. But yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see how that plays out. Now,
That's
honestly, I see.
Totally what I meant. Yeah.
I think if they can't go and they aren't allowed to play remotely, what I hope happens is that Gen G goes instead. I know that will be controversial, but since they would be
the most Monty take of all time. If
no,
China, we just send another Korean team that's really good. Like that is the most Monty take of all time.
Look, for the sake of the tournament, I
know what you mean. Sure.
For the sake of the tournament, technically on the world seeding list, right, as to like who gets more teams, since Korea was the runner-up at Worlds last year, in theory, they should be the first in line to send their second seed to MSI. So it works. And they're already there. You know?
Okay.
Come on,
I'm not sure that one makes very much sense to be honest. But yeah,
it's all right. You have to send someone. It's the point. So
yeah, I would just look. I think the reason why it makes sense is the tournament is going to be worse without the LPL team there, and this is a way that you could make it more compelling.
I think you should send TSM. That'll make it compelling as fuck. Who wouldn't tune in for that? The only rule is Reginald has to travel with the team.
Well, the new rule, the new rumors are that Duanby apparently on his stream said that Maple and Bo might be going to NA, which almost certainly means that they're going to TSM. So that would be
Monty. Please let fucking TSM sign a fucking convicted match fixer. Just please. I need this so much. They're unreal, mate. There's nothing they won't do in that team. Bloody hell. Fucking hell, it's unreal.
Yeah.
At least, by the way, shout out if Maple actually gets squad. I'd like to see him play LCS. I think he'd probably be pretty good.
Yeah. I've heard for a long time too his English is good, so I would assume that would be. I'm actually shocked he didn't come to LCS earlier. Frankly, like he's always been a guy we've talked about coming to LCS for a very long time. But the Bo signing would be absolutely hilarious. Also, then they'd have to do something different. I don't know who they would get for support at that point in time, but have to get a native. But yep, it would be interesting. It would be interesting. Bo is a very good player. He's just.
No, he was. He was he had a lot of potential. Yeah, just unfortunately, he was fucking around. Yeah. Alas.
All right. Do we have any final questions for Dylan before we bid him farewell and talk about LCS stuff?
I mean, the obvious one is just something like, give us some thoughts on like what should we expect from G2 in the summer? Like, if you're going back to back, you're going to be the best teams. Give us the usual stuff. Come on, give us your thoughts.
Summer. Well, we have to go to MSI before summer, so I hope we do well at MSI.
Thoughts on T1?
They're really good. I think most people would think that they're the best team right now. Of course. That being said, we founded our team by playing a lot of games against like top Korean and Chinese teams, and I think. Although we might not go in as favorites, I think will be competitive for sure. We'll see, right? Like I've got rookies on my team, so we'll see.
You can have an no-show.
We are actually very hopeful. Like we do not feel like we're coming in as a team that won't be like on their level. As for summer, I think there will be a lot of roster changes in Europe. Actually,
ooh, okay.
I
spicy.
I think that there is a lot of room. Because I think a lot of teams really broke in playoffs. Like they really just broke. Like they just went 0-3 in their sets against us. So I think there's a lot of room for another team to like become good, or maybe make one or two roster changes and just become good. So I think that the landscape of the top 3 in LEC will be different next year. I think we will win, but I think there's room for something else.
Can you pick one that you would pick to be elevated into that group? Who would be the team you imagine might do it and might make it? Who would you pick?
I think the teams that could elevate and become good, I would say it could be either Vitality, XL, or Mad Lions. All these 3 would be
Mad
like
Lions,
the dark horses.
Yes.
All right.
Because they have
without revealing possible roster swaps, tell me with your knowledge which 3 teams are going to Worlds from LEC.
Okay. I don't know any roster swaps, by the way.
Okay.
I would say G2 Rogue, and then the last one's really hard, I think. G2 Rogue, and let's say Vitality.
Ooh,
that's a ballsy pick. Okay.
I like it. I like it. Look, I think objectively it would be sad if Vitality wasn't improved and going to Worlds, because everybody wants that result and we want to see them compete internationally. We want to see them live up to that potential. So I like it.
Sure.
Yeah, but then Fnatic has to not go. So
I'm okay with that.
What a shame.
I mean, for Fnatic fans, I'm okay with that, but there's some fucking bag of players on that team. My problem is there's just too much talent on both teams. I need both of them, so I'm not going to get both, it doesn't look like, but gotta fucking hope. Gotta hope.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on, Dylan. Really appreciate your time on short notice after winning, and we'll have you on again. Good luck at MSI. I'm really excited.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Go against T1.
Okay, take care.
And now we do video questions, because that was the break. Again, if you're watching the stream now and you're going, "What? This is really weird." Yeah, but we're getting paid now, motherfuckers. You can just sit back. You pay nothing anyway.
No.
Oh, some people do pay money and they buy Grog coin. There we go. Segue.
There you go. So basically, guys, you just for the VOD viewers, this is all going to make logical sense.
Great. Yeah,
for the live viewers, this has been extremely scuffed and will all be taken out of order. And for the VOD viewers, you probably noticed a lot of editing. So there you go. We fucked it up this time. So sorry, guys. Anyway, on to our viewer questions in the Insight on Esports Discord. Grogcoin 25 holders. There's a Grogcoin channel. You can learn how to get it. It's great. First question is, Joe Marsh stated franchise leagues should still incorporated on the Double Lift podcast, to be clear of where this was, that he did with LS recently. Stated franchise leagues should still incorporate a promotion relegation system, so even the bottom feeder teams would be incentivized to stay competitive. What if every major league doubles its franchise spots, or puts them up to 16, let's say, brings in fresh orgs and have the weaker half play in the lower league with promotion? So you have 8 teams in an upper and 8 teams in a lower league. Wouldn't owners/sponsors be more open to this idea since their teams are at least guaranteed a spot in the lower league? I mean, it's not a bad idea. I just don't think there are enough players. I also don't think the teams would agree to it.
Here's what I love about this topic. So Joe Marsh of T1 thinks maybe teams should be allowed to get relegated. So not T1 then, mate. Like, your team's never been the bottom of the foot. What is this shit? Like, I'd like to know what FlyQuest's on a thing. I'd like to know what Golden Guardian's on a thing. That's the person I want to know.
This is also, I think, Joe, there were a lot of issues, I think, with that podcast. First off, Doublelift didn't ask any questions about the fact that T1 was going to hire LS and then due to fan backlash, didn't hire him. So I would have loved to hear a Joe Marsh explanation about that entire situation. But also in terms of franchising, guys, T1 is bankrolled by fucking Comcast. Like, they're never going to get relegated because they have the best player of all time, because they're the most popular Korean team in esports history, even before that, because they have a 25-year history at this point in time. And so they're already very popular, have an established fan base, and they have infinite money. So, of course, Joe Marsh is in favor of this because he's never going to face this situation because he simply has an infinite pool of resources to work from and a storied org that will naturally attract players that goes back. You could have been a fan, like I said, for decades of T1 at this point in time, going back to the StarCraft days. So, of course, he's in favor of this. It would never happen to him, realistically.
By the way, shout out to those fans that I saw. These are in all the threads, Monty. You can go if you want some pure comedy gold pipeline straight into your veins. Just go into the threads for the Doublelift podcasts, and there is always mega upvoted sub-threads that go like this, Monty. Wow, Lena's doing a really good job helping Doublelift with his image and setting this podcast up, which has now had 4 episodes. Right, let me just explain something to the fans that say that. You are the one who doesn't think women are equal or capable of the same things. You do not believe Lena was actually hired because she was good at her job. You do not believe she was the president of TSM. And here's how I know. Because you're impressed she's able to help one person slightly increase his brand and do 4 episodes of a podcast. By the way, podcast hiring, like booking, that's amateur shit, right? She was the president of a $400 million valuated company that is famous across the whole world. If you believe she actually was doing that job, that's a bit more impressive than helping Doublelift.
Very impressive, in fact.
Do a fucking podcast. So you're the ones that have shown the bigotry of low expectations. You don't believe she actually did that job. Here's the difference. I think it's 50-50. I think she got her foot in the door because she knew Reginald, and then there wasn't any other fucking competent people in TSM, and she had some initiative and had brought some ideas. I think it's a bit of both. You all have just been exposed, though. If you think her fucking greatest accomplishment was doing a podcast, what are you talking about? She was at the top of the esports industry, guys.
She also did bring in a lot of like very big influencers to TSM. Yeah. Like, I think that's her strength. Yes. I think that's her strength is actually like influencer management. So
she was poaching the fuck out of loads of them. But you know what? I hate things, Lena. What do you know? Like, not least because when you're talking, it comes from bloody other people's microphones. Whatever. I scuffed that shot. Keep going.
Anyway, so back to the relegation thing. Like, I think obviously relegation would be better in terms of increasing competition. I think we went on the whole LCS, why LCS is bad rant earlier. I don't think relegation is going to make LCS better. I just don't. It didn't before. Guys, was LCS doing great at Worlds when there was relegation? Answer the question. No, they weren't. So it's not going to save LCS.
And I personally think it's just going to be too much. Listen, I know competitively none of us want to hear this, but I think it will also be a way bigger red flag for someone to actually buy into the league.
Yes, of course.
And imagine I buy in for 10 million, Monty, and then I spend 4 million on my roster, and then I get relegated. What the fuck was the point of that? What have I just done?
What I really dislike about Joe Marsh's take too is that he knows it's not going to happen because he bought into a franchise system with the intent of there no longer being relegation, which also was a much hotter topic in Korea.
Yes,
because Koreans really didn't want the franchise system.
Remember, Monty,
the reason he bought it. The reason he bought the slot was because he couldn't get relegated, and that's the reason why everyone bought the slot. He's not. It's such a disingenuous take from an owner because the value of those spots craters if there is relegation, and then Riot would have to give back money. And what he's doing is he's like, this is what the fans want me to say, but it's not realistic with the businesses and the money that went into buying these slots. Like Riot would have to return a bunch of money basically to the team owners that they took in terms of these payments, because that was the whole point of the franchising system in the first place. That is what they were sold. That's what the value was. So like, I mean, I get that, you know, he's riding high, got the big win. But there's no way from a business perspective that he doesn't understand that that's not possible. He's saying it because that's what the fans want to hear.
I'll give you a reason it's bad. Even though I personally think it would be hilarious if TSM got relegated from LCS, sure, it would be inarguably terrible for the fans of the league for years. And here's why. Because whoever replaces them can never be TSM. They can't have TSM's history. They can't have built up that fan base. They can't have had the great players they had. So whoever comes in after them, even if they're better at the game, so short term, it's better for competitive stuff, it would actually ruin the esports like fandom, etc. Because I can tell you, I followed football when I was a child, and this is the model we use in European soccer, which is you can be relegated from the Premier League. You know what happened, Monty? The first team to ever win the Premier League, it was in like 1992 or 3 or something, was Leeds United, right? At the time, they were one of the best teams. Then what happened was this, right? A couple of years later, they got relegated, right? Monty, they are nobody now. I think that club even went bankrupt years ago. Because what happened was, they eventually, in English football, it wasn't just that. There was a whole thing. You could get relegated from this one to the next one. And that's what some of these teams did. Formerly great franchises from when you used to just have people who came from that city that made them good. When they became part of this business, the ones who dropped down, you either really knuckle down, make good moves, and you get straight back up again. Or there were clubs that were once giants who for real are nobody now, Monty, and they've gone all the way down the divisions, and their club will never return again. So that means when you're telling the history of the game, you can't bring like they're brilliant, oh, they did all this in the 70s, and then it's ruined. You've ruined. You've got a brand new squad. You've got a team maybe no one even supported, but they're just good now. So again, as a purist, I just want the best teams, but I also understand esports right now is paying and losing money, so we have to consider the business angle. Otherwise, there is no sport, I'm afraid. There's no sport.
But like, what's so baffling to me is like Joe Marsh was the one who bought into this system. They deliberately went into a joint venture with T1 to buy a franchise within the Korean League. Like, you know what the business terms of this arrangement are. And if you don't like this system, you simply could not have bought T1 and gotten into League of Legends. Like, that was totally an option. So it's super confusing. Or you could have said, in Korea, we don't want there to be a franchise system. You know, as part of this joint partnership, we want to come in and we want to spend all this money. Basically, you would have been like the Manchester United or Man City, owned by an extremely rich person or rich corporate entity that really would never actually face relegation. That would be extremely unlikely, right? So it was never necessary for him to have the franchise system in the first place. So I'd love to know why he supported the franchise system when he bought into it. There's an idea for you. It just feels like he wants to be popular, and he's getting like the dopamine hits from the fans, like being like, yeah, Joe Marsh, but it's not realistic. And it doesn't actually give you any insight into the business proposal or the realities of having a relegation system reinstituted right now would literally cost Riot like hundreds of millions of dollars in return franchise fees, and it would collapse the value of the teams. Like, the teams need those franchise slots because they're raising money based on the value of those slots. If the value of the slots collapses, then the valuation of the teams collapses, and then they have no more money, and then esports collapses. That's like realistically what would happen. So I don't think his points are not in business reality, except for him, who has infinite Comcast money.
Am I missing something? Aside from buying into T1, what's his qualification to be an expert on that topic? Oh, I missed something. Do you guys know where he wasn't there when they won all the world championships, you idiots? Like, he didn't build SKT. Like, he's not a guy who's some esports expert.
Guess what, Thorin?
Money, that's it.
He comes from the Philadelphia Flyers, which are also owned by Comcast, which is an NHL team in a franchise league. Enough said.
Difference is, I'd actually like if he came, like I said, from European soccer, then I might be interested. Like, oh, how would that work? You know, would you have experience with it? But I don't give a fuck what he thinks, mate. Just because he's LS's mate, I don't give a fuck. I'm not like you plebs who go, seems like a great guy. How would you know from a podcast? You moron. I'm an awesome guy. I just seem like a dickhead. Whatever. There's a great truth in that. In both sides.
It's true, actually.
It's true. Yeah, it's true. Put it this way, Machine, when he first met me, said, "Can I tweet this?" And I was like, "Okay, why is he asking me that?" And he wanted to tweet like, "I'm with Thorin, the lovable dickhead." And I was like, "I mean, whatever. I guess he did say lovable, so fucking go bombs away, right?" So,
all right. We now have a butt pounded 024 as also butt pounder 420. So we're just getting all the iterations of this name out there.
Getting pincered now. Okay.
It would benefit everyone if all chat from pro games was visible on stream during game and pre-game lobby. It would add texture to the game, give players a chance to display their mental edge / build their brand. It is hilarious. I agree. And Riot could feel safe to display the chat knowing they could hand out suspensions or fines. Yeah. And exactly. You could do suspensions and fines. By the way, nobody ever actually checks to see if the player's bank account goes down when they receive a fine.
No. As far as I know, a lot of the big...
Who knows if those are ever even collected?
Supposedly, even if they do pay them, because the obvious thing to do would be do an amnesty, Monty, and pretend to the fans that you find them. But I've heard even if you're a star player anyway, you don't pay anyway. Your club just pays it for you, and it's part of the cost of having a star player, isn't it? Yeah.
Cloud9, I can just tell you straight up, like Jack just... the high middle finger, he paid that fine. It was hilarious. And they realize it's good for their brand.
He doesn't come and go, "Come on then, hi, 2K, get it out." Like, that does never happen. There's no fucking...
No, here's what happened. Jack's like, "Thanks for all the Twitter impressions. Exactly. High five. I'll pay it."
Here's what Jack should have done, but unfortunately, you don't want to antagonize Riot. I would have just made a t-shirt of high, and then I'd have sold it and I'd have used that to pay off the fine. But then again, I'm a dickhead, like I said, so don't worry about that. No, Jack's on my shit entirely, He's on my shit.
So anyway, I back to the all chat. I don't know, because it can be distracting from the game at hand, right? I think the casters should be able to see it, and then they should be able to call to reveal it so that they can have the judgment of what is going on and what is being said. I think that way you can weave it in.
They can say, "Oh, let's check out what they said." Yeah, that would be
because
cool.
Otherwise it's just like the shit that LCS does, where tweets pop up on the screen, where it's just as a caster, it's infuriating because you're like, I'm trying to tell this story right now, and then there's this random shit happening on the screen. So I think if casters have the ability to see it and then have the ability to say, "Okay, production, bring that up," then they bring it up. I think that's the way to do it. But I think it would be funny. I mean, obviously, the Jizuke shit last year was hilarious.
Here's how I know that people would enjoy it, Monty, because it's already one of the low-key most fun parts of the game. Like, for example, with when fucking what's his name, when Caps was killing I don't know, Perks or something, and you flash the G2 and more. Of course, that's hilarious, isn't it? Everyone knows. Imagine if they could actually type something to him, that'd be even better, wouldn't it? If you type it, "Watch me now," all that shit. I'd love that shit. I love it. I love it all. I love it all.
All right, so here's real butt pounder 420, not butt pounded 024. You find yourself in the unenviable position of having to pick a Russell Wilson, Mr. Unlimited tier nickname for yourself. That is a bad one.
That's the thing. I actually, literally, that's a rare example of when I went out of my way and I sent Monty these Instagram stories Russell Wilson was doing. And mate, here's the problem. Brilliant quarterback. One of the most cringe humans I think I've ever seen as a sports star. He doesn't get it, dude. He's just perma cringe, isn't he? Because he was doing this whole thing Mr. Unlimited. Oh, God. It was he was doing a skit or something. Oh, he's hurting me inside.
His new thing with the Broncos, by the way, is he just ends everything. He's like, "Let's ride. Let's ride." Every time.
He's so cringe.
He says it every time. Every Instagram story, every video, at the end, he just looks at the camera. He's like, "Let's ride." I'm like, Stop.
Give me a break. The problem is he is just a massive nerd, isn't he? You can just tell he is. He's a mega player, but what a fucking nerd.
He is a dork. So one that would have the walking antithesis of all that is cool himself saying, "Bro, that was kind of cringe. What are you gentlemen going with?" I mean, look, the obvious one for me, I did the train whistle thing one time, but can you imagine how annoying and cringe it would be if I just ended every segment talking about Koreans with blowing the train whistle? It only worked because I did it once. So I already got that going. I could easily make that incredible.
Thing is, any other influencer would do that all the time. I can't lie. I'm different from a lot of people. I actually don't think it's actually that fun when people spam a simple joke, but to oblivion. I find it does ruin it. For example, it's not actually that funny to me now to be Yanko Spear missed. It's sometimes he didn't even miss. Sometimes he had a good game and people just spam that. Same thing with Ender, "Oh, weird champ." Did that not get boring after 5 minutes, guys? Is that really still the thing? Saying weird champ? Give me a fucking break. This is getting boring. You've got a multi-personality, the weird champ.
The Ender weird champ is very equivalent to the Mr. Unlimited.
Because they just kept saying it over and over again. And they're what? Okay, he's weird. And here's the thing, he might seem weird, but first of all, A, he's good on the broadcast, and B, who the fuck else is going to leave all that wardrobe for scoring left behind? That's a fire joke if you watched this broadcast. That's fire if you watched it. And by the way, props to Ender for being so brave.
All right. An anime question is next. Oh, you didn't even. What was your cringe saying?
What would mine be? What would mine be? Something like, I mean, I guess mine, Monty, would be if I just ended every joke with that shit Shaq joke. Like, what about weight loss? Is that a sport? It's everything. No matter what they say, what about weight loss? Is that a sport? Just kept doing that all the time. Again, it worked. It was brilliant once, but I feel like you could run that in the ground quite easily, couldn't you? It become quite cringe in some ways,
All right. The topic is anime. Context. Over the course of many episodes of Summoning Insight, Thorin and Monty have made passing comments about anime. I'm genuinely curious about some of these passing comments. Okay, so we have two questions. Question for Thorin. With respect to the whole concept of this person will do X, but I expected him to do this, so I counter with Y. Okay. And it goes on and on like the poison Y.
It means like Yu-Gi-Oh style.
Yeah. Why do you consider this to be bad writing? Because it's a Deus Ex Machina, guys.
Not even a real question. Because here's the problem. I'll explain it very seriously. Here's why it's bad writing. And you'll notice, by the way, that is a classic trope that Hollywood does in TV shows all the time. The reason you can't guess what the other guy's going to do is because A, he had a perfect simulation of your mind inside his mind, and then he did something that they gave you no clue that it was possible. I'll explain to someone a concept I once heard. It's a brilliant concept if you're creative. It was by Raymond Chandler, the great... noir and detective story, right? Because in a detective story, you're following along with the detective, right? A fan thinks, well, the best one is the one that I can't solve, right? He solves it and he's the genius. That's where everyone who's a bad writer takes a classic shortcut. They lie. They just show you fake things. They show you a dream, but don't tell you it was a dream. They show you something because he thought this guy murdered. And then later when they show you the real murder, that wasn't even the person who did it. In that scenario, you could never have guessed. They made it impossible for you to guess. It's only clever because they're not allowing you to have a chance to be smart. The real clever guy, and the person who nailed this, by the way, is Agatha Christie. Have you ever read an Agatha Christie novel? The genius in a shit writer makes it so you can't guess who did the murder because everyone's got a perfect alibi. Agatha Christie makes it so nobody has an alibi. They all had a reason to do it, and that way you really have to intuit your way through the maze of this is a red herring and this could be the person, but they didn't have the motivation, and eventually you do arrive at the cleverest answer. That's basically why that type of anime is shit, because all they're doing is just pulling the rug out from you. And the character always is like, you can always tell the writer's like wrote outside of his bounds. They're not as smart as him, which is where it fails completely for me.
Well, it's also that you never see Yu-Gi-Oh's deck, right? So literally anything could be in there, right? It literally is. It literally is a Deus Ex Machina, which is the god from the machine, which is like there's just a random in Greek theater. This is the concept of like the god just like appears at the end of the play and just like fixes everything or like throws the wrench in the work. It's like okay, goodbye. So it's a whole thing. It's like literally a god takes over, and it has nothing to do with the writing. It's the same principle in playwriting that like Chekhov's gun famously is, which is the concept that if there is a gun that is called for within the script, then it must be used at some point within the play, right? So that if there's an object that is introduced, it has to interact with the characters of the plot at some point in time. And speaking of Agatha Christie, by the way, if you guys want to check that out, there's a movie that just came out for Death on the Nile with Kenneth Branagh, and you guys are going to think I'm going to say, go watch the movie. The movie's kind of bad.
Watch the David Suchet one, what you're going to say.
No, I'm going to say listen to the audiobook, which is narrated by Kenneth Branagh. So he, before releasing the movie, did a new audiobook where he is narrating everything, and it is fucking amazing because Kenneth Branagh is a brilliant actor, and the movie is kind of scuffed and it's not as good as the book, and they changed a bunch of shit, but the actual audiobook of the words written by Agatha Christie with Kenneth Branagh doing all the voices is incredible. So
I would just say, don't do that. Go and watch the fucking 70s to present. Well, it's like 2000s. The David Suchet Poirot. That is Poirot. That is the shit. That guy killed it. He was just nailed that role completely. He's mega. It's just fucking unreal.
All right. So yes, that's why it's bad. It's just bad writing, basically. It's writing for children. Even though Greek playwright masters did it was still lame when they did it, which is also, by the way, guys, if you are unfamiliar with why or you have not been able to express yourself why the ending for Mass Effect was so bad, it's because it was a literal Deus Ex Machina. You get to the end of these 3 games, the 3rd game's very good, and then all of a sudden an actual god comes out of a machine. It's a literal Deus Ex Machina and changes the entire plot, and therefore makes all of the character, basically all of your gameplay, all the decisions you made are suddenly irrelevant because there's just a god who's going to fix everything. Stupid. Question for Monty. You've said you find the premise of Attack on Titan good, but don't otherwise care for it. Why is that? So a lot of anime premises, like I actually love, if you describe the premise of an anime to somebody, many of them sound fucking awesome. Like they're very creative. Like they have, all these anime and manga have cool worlds, but the problem is that they're ruined because they insert children's writing into these worlds, right? You have these like teenage protagonists and the actual character interactions are very childish. The way the information is presented by childish. So the problem is that you have a cool concept, but the themes within them are oftentimes dumbed down to appeal to children. And there are exceptions to this. One of them is Evangelion, because Evangelion makes you think it's going to do that, and then it gets really fucked up and is actually entirely adult themes. And you know, the characters, the children characters are dealing with very adult situations, which is what makes
commentary. Yeah.
Yeah. It's intentional meta commentary on the mecha genre. That is why Eva is good, guys. So there are times where it becomes adults. There are other animes that I like. Monster is a great example of an anime that is very adult in terms of its themes. It's just a medium. So it's not necessarily anime. It's just cool concepts that I think are dealt with in a childish fashion or are made to pander to younger audiences that I just don't have, I'm not 15 anymore. I can read adult fiction or I can engage in adult mediums that I find more interesting.
I'll also say there's a big flaw that anime has in terms of the actual TV series, which is, remember, it comes from a manga, and in theory, it's usually pretty close to the manga, right? Here's the point. In a manga, you can read it so quickly. Who gives a fuck about a silly throwaway joke that was shit? On screen, I am forced to sit there. I cannot make it go fast. It is going at 26 frames past my face. I have to sit through those shit jokes. I can't just skip through them really fast. Like, I know in theory, everyone's going to go, you can just skip through the episode. No one's doing that, mate. Like, no one's fucking doing it. Like, you're just watching a show. So for me, I've always just found the pacing's just shit. There's too much little kid stuff. And the worst thing
is terrible.
They always just drip feed the really interesting themes you're talking about. They never bloody let you really experience them. Like, you get it for one big episode every 50 or whatever, don't you? So, whereas I want a show like True Detective, where like every show is that. It's just a main storyline with all the great shit, just full, and then at the end there's 8 of them and you're out of there. It's not like, check out this guide to know which 50 episodes to skip. Why am I skipping 50 episodes? This is a bad format, guys.
It's also, guys, like, look, I can appreciate some of the shows to a limited degree, like Naruto or One Piece, that have 1 billion episodes, because they know what they are. They're not trying to be like deep adult, adult content, basically, like with really interesting themes or nuance. But the thing is like, I can't watch like 1,000 episodes of that shit. If I had time to watch 1,000 episodes of fucking One Piece, think of all the other things I could do with that time instead of watching One Piece. There's just, the value proposition is just insane with anime. Like, it's just not there most of the time. Like what Thorin's saying, just end it. Like, tell the story you want to tell. Death Note was over in 13 episodes, guys. It was done. Those episodes were good. And then the rest of it's garbage. That's it.
So by the way, when people tell you though, yeah, but after 100 episodes it gets really good. You know what? If you just learn to read, reading gets fucking incredible. So just put your time into that. Go on. Exactly. I know I think it's hard, isn't it? It's a bit hard work. It isn't. Once you get past that threshold, it's amazing. It's
imagine if you spent all the time you spent watching One Piece, watching every classic movie ever, and then having that in your brain instead of One Piece.
The shit, yeah. Imagine the references you'd
Why are you watching One Piece? Seriously, just watch something better. All right, if you were to do a time travel LAN for LOL, because this is the content you've been doing recently with Richard, right? What would be your spicy picks for teams to be included/excluded from the tournament? I feel like, should we just do an episode of this for LOL at some point in time?
Yeah. We'll do like
we'll hold off on that
one. We'll do a League of Legends one.
Yeah, I think the concept's really cool, and we're just not going to have time to talk about that here, so we'll just do a separate episode on that. Do you think newer champions are net positive or negative to esports?
Does he mean in League of Legends?
I guess in League, yeah. No, like new champions to the game, like characters to the game.
Yeah, that's what's confusing to me, because here's the problem. Like, they've almost committed from day one in League that it is a game about turnover and variety and not playing the same things every split in season, and the idea that you don't just have the same draw. So the problem is this. I feel like it's a negative, but I prefer static esports where I can understand every piece out there, what the interactions are. To me, League's always going to be chaotic as a result. So I feel like in the model that League does, it's probably a positive. I imagine the game wouldn't have lasted this long if it didn't have so many things. Just for me personally, for what I like in competitive integrity, it's one of the things I like the least. Because if my favourite player's Flame, this year it's just tanks. Well, it fucking sucks for me, doesn't it? So it depends. I think it depends who you are.
So I think the problem is that with League of Legends, the longer time goes on, the barrier to entry to viewership is going to be so high. The only reason League is a popular esport is because it has an enormous player base. If that ever changes, then the esport's going to have no viewers, because if you stopped watching 3 years ago, you can't understand the game now. If I stopped watching Counter-Strike 3 years ago, I can come back tomorrow and watch Counter-Strike. It's evergreen. It will last forever. It's a much better. You can never have played Counter-Strike and enjoy Counter-Strike. That's not true of League of Legends. You literally won't have any idea what the fuck is going on the screen. So I think it's a bad way to run esports because it's incredibly dependent on converting a huge fan base into esports viewership. I don't know how you fix it with League at this point. You can't. It's just a worse game than CS. Do you think newer champions are... I think what I would like to have happen to make it more palatable is that you cycle out a champion as you cycle in a new champion. So if a champion needs rework, you take it out of the competitive pool. Now, people can still play normal games with that champion or whatever, but they can't play ladder with it. Now, obviously, Riot's not going to do that because people will get pissed that they can't use their skins in competitive or blah, 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 blah. But I think if you had set a precedent early that there's going to be a discrete champion pool of like 50 champions and you have to figure out how to use those, at least it would be easier to get into it from an esports perspective, but they're not going to do that. So I guess it's good because League is huge. Do I think it's going to work in Valorant? No, because Valorant doesn't have a big enough player base.
I even think that's a side tangent, but that's something to me that Riot should actually have been considering as soon as they got to about 100 champions. They should have been considering a Magic the Gathering style limited set. Like, right, for this spring, it's only going to be this 60 champions, and you pick them to make it interesting. You pick a few tanks, you pick a few, you figure it out. That could be a very interesting approach to take, because remember, in those worlds, you can pick if you want to play an open one with just your friend, or you can play this set, or you can play only the new ones. Like, you could have done that approach too. It's just the problem is, it's like I said, they're sort of too far down the path of what their philosophy is on doing this, that, like you said about the skins, they've painted themselves into a corner now. Like, how could you take out some of the skins? Like, I mean, I know some of them only have one, but there's like the certain ones that have like 10 skins or whatever. You're going to kill yourself if you take out the Thresh, for example. Like, everyone's bought that bloody Blood Moon Thresh or whatever, haven't they? Like, there's certain ones that if you take out, it'll just sort of, in the short term, it'll be too big a backlash, I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, their monetization model is just bad for esports. Now, CS, you can change maps because the monetization is not tied to the map, right? So you can keep it fresh and the guns don't change. So the problem is that there are just too many fucking champions, and in 10 years, there are going to be even more champions, and there are going to be fewer players probably within this game. So what do you do? So I think there will always be a limit on what you can do with League, because unless they create these discrete competitive champion pools, the game is just so overwhelming for new people to join. It's very difficult. Shittest esports org logo, probably the Pittsburgh Knights. That one is truly awful. They actually switched from a better logo to a worse logo. Although there are so many bad esports logos. I mean, G2's logo is bad. TSM's logo is horrendous.
Shit.
The better question is, what are good esports logos? I think the Cloud9 logo, Cloud9 logo is very good. I like the Team Liquid logo, even though it has nothing to do with Liquid. I wish they would just call themselves the Stallions or something like that. But the logo, in isolation of the name, is good. Them together is shit.
I'll give you what I think's a mad, sleeper, underrated logo. Invictus Gaming's logo. I think that's banging, mate. The I and the G bit together, but so stylized. I love that shit. I think that one looks... That is in... Because they never changed it, if people don't know. That one looks good to this day. That's just a good logo, mate.
Yeah, I think most of them are bad. I like Rogue's logo. I think Rogue's logo is good.
Oh, I'll tell you one that's pretty bad. Especially because, remember, I'm not Chinese, so I don't use any of their stuff. Go and look at the logo for Weibo Gaming, the team that the Shy plays for. Holy fuck, that logo is bad. It's garbage. What is that? It's like an eye of a chicken farting or some sound out of his arse. What the fuck is that shit? What is that? It looks like some sort of abomination I'd find in Area 51. What is that shit?
Yeah, there are a lot of bad ones, guys. Most of them are bad.
It's pretty bad.
Opinions on the Bloop drama. What is this? Do you know what the Bloop drama is?
Yeah, here's the quick version, right? Let me think. How did it begin, though? I think it began something like Rich, as in Rich's Wrath, the former H2K Rich, got into some drama with Bloop, the guy who used to be an anonymous leaker, but now his name is known as like some Spanish name or something, who obviously now has become like more legit. And basically they just got back, back and forth. I think it was over the fact that Rich at the beginning of the split said that he would take like 20 ADCs over Flacked or something. And obviously Flacked comes from fucking whatever, he's Spanish, isn't he? So if you don't know, Spanish and French people, they all just ride super hard for people from their country, whether they're right or wrong. And that key detail there is the crux of the whole matter. So the Bloop guy, unsurprisingly, I don't know if you know this, I'm going to do some videos on this, don't worry. There's a whole bunch of shit that he's been involved in, which show that, guess what, he is just a 19-year-old stupid kid who doesn't know the industry and has been boosted way beyond his competence level. Because he's doing stuff, Rich, basically, that was found. Like, he basically has worked for G2 while reporting on G2 without putting a disclaimer in the articles. He's apparently working with KOI, the fucking eBuy team, and then reporting on stuff in the scene and around them, but not every time saying a disclaimer. You notice how every time Monty would make a comment when he worked for Cloud9 about Cloud9, I would always say, remember, Monty works for Cloud9. You notice how when I would say ProView is really good, I would have to say every fucking time I have shares in the company. Now, you're idiots, so you probably think, he's just bragging about shit. No, I'm saying that so you know that someone who owns stock in the company is telling you something's good. That's important information to know contextually. This guy is reporting on teams while he gets paid potentially by them or has some association with them. Now, by the way, just saying it once on Twitter ain't enough. That disclaimer has to be there for every person who comes and gets an episode. So anyway, right, rather than just address this topic, Monty, this kid's answers were twofold. One, he just sort of flamed Rich and said he refuses to explain himself. And then two, he said if he has to sort it out with anyone, it's with the parties involved, not like the entire community. Like, this guy doesn't get it, mate. They don't get it at all. They never fucking... Conflict of interest will never be understood by idiots. It'll never be understood.
Well, I feel dumber from having listened to that. So
it was bad. It was bad, all of it. Don't worry. There was nothing good came out of that. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about that.
So I guess the thrust of it is that there was a conflict of interest. It sounds like it was a pretty obvious conflict of interest, and you'll make a video explaining the conflict of interest?
I'll probably just make a video where I address this at some point, because that guy also absolutely fucked up and tried to flame me in a way where it's come back right in his face. Because all you need to know, Monty, is he's one of those dickheads in the industry who decided to use being blocked by me as a way to get some clout. But you want to know the bad news, Monty? A few months before he publicly bragged about being blocked, he sent a random Twitch message to me on Twitch. I have never streamed. No one knows my account. He just guessed my account, sent a DM begging to be unblocked. Fuck you, dude. Fuck you. I wanted this, mate. I don't give a fuck. So don't worry. I'm going to get them all. Don't worry about when. If you know the way I operate, I have videos from years ago. I've still got the thumbnail. I've still got it'll get done eventually. So I'll process all you. You're not at the top of my list, but I'll process it. Don't worry. I'll get to it in a few weeks, maybe.
You know what I love, Thorin? I love it when people antagonize you and Richard and think you're not going to go digging. Like, why do people in this industry, why are they so stupid that they antagonize investigative journalists? Like, they will look and find things about you. You don't want to motivate them. Like, don't be stupid. Just when people say things, just let the water pass under the bridge. Don't fuck with them. People never get it though. And then they have like the surprise Pikachu meme when like you guys release an article about all this stuff that you've done.
It's so stupid, isn't it? I know. Especially because it's another factor they never think through, Monty. One of the reasons they think they'll never get got is they think, well, how is he going to get any info on me? Anyone who doesn't like you, once I make it public that you have a war with me, is coming to me immediately with all the information. Exactly. I don't even have to do any digging at that point in time, mate. Now, what they do is they know I'm about to roast you alive, and they go, here's some ammunition. And then just then it is a real roast session, mate. So buckle up.
It is too funny. It is too funny. All right. Well, those are all the questions on the Grog Coin channel on the Discord today. Thank you guys for asking. We will, I know yesterday at the live viewing, I said it'd be Raz today, but I fucked up, and that's Raz next week. But we are going to do watch parties. If you guys haven't checked it out, go watch us do watch parties on the Insight on Esports Twitch channel. You guys can give that a follow. We did watch parties for the EPL semis and CS with Thorin and Vendetta and Paladin this last week. Then we did watch parties for the LEC finals with me and Thorin and Amazing. We will have guests for these watch parties. We will do one for one of the LCS matches this weekend, and then the next weekend for the LCS finals. Maybe you'll do some European RMR stuff, some Blast stuff. Who knows? We'll
find
figure it
something.
out. But yeah, follow the channel if you guys want to watch CSGO and LoL watch parties. We'll be doing more of those. Thanks to Esports Bet. Please use our referral link if you guys want to use the site. That's it. See you next week. Bye.